No, no, he does not recognize the hardware.
It's the same with mine.
The same, yeah.
Não dá para entrar.
You have to ask the guy here.
Não, ele não
Ele não,
Não tá abrindo?
não abre.
Não abre o seu?
Não reconhece o coisa.
Posso ver o meu? O que acontece?
Pode, mas aí eu tenho que tirar esse aqui.
É.
Peraí.
É. Olha o que acontece com...
Luiz tem o assessor aqui.
Só passa porque aqui ele não reconhece. Peraí.
Ah, ele não reconhece desse lado?
Você não pede ajuda quando chega, não tem.
Então me dá uma.
One thing I want to go into in a lot of detail though is basically unpacking and showing some
tá?
about this whole
Ele ainda não. Tá
kind of efficiency, the kind of they're putting aid into that perspective.
É aqui nisso.
Because that's what
Essa aqui, ó.
Joga logo pra
Pois é,
escalar.
isso. Pronto.
same type of graph, but
Né? É isso mesmo. Ok.
so I have the data, I just have to
Não,
just to compare that to Korea.
okay. No, it doesn't work this way. Let me take.
Dentro do que dá o tempo, né?
Por aqui é sua área.
Bica bióloga.
It's in here. See?
Yeah. That's right. Let me see.
No, it doesn't work there.
No, is in the other?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's here. Thanks.
Okay.
What's coming?
Alguém está com o programa? We are now starting these two sessions that they are called Building a School for Advanced Studies. The first one is Case and Experiences, and the second one is Structuring Research Projects. I think we can have both, one after the other, and discuss all the matters that it's. The three next sessions are building a school for advanced studies. So we're going to more practical issues and how to do the school, the ways of functioning, etc. And we have a wonderful panel here, and I'm going to ask Professor Débora Fogel from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She is the rector, as we call, from research and teaching in graduate teaching. So she's going to have the conduction. She will be the chairwoman of this session. And then we have the other one is it's a flow of cases and experiences and research projects, okay?
So Ana, should I speak in Portuguese or English? Rather, can I do it in Portuguese? Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here in such a wonderful and selective meeting. So, Anna asked me to talk about my own, it's really a personal experience in building an advanced school here in Brazil. And first of all, I would like to take 1 or 2 minutes just to introduce myself, because I'm not from this area. I'm biologist and biochemistry, in fact. And so my experience in building a school, so as you probably know, CAPES, that's the coordination of personnel in Brazil. There is an open call that you can ask money, and it's open all over the year, all areas. So there is a channel that all Brazilians research can ask money. It's a very nice project, very well designed. We can pay the people that come, and we have plenty of money to do this in the best we can. So then I was, so then introducing myself, as I mentioned, so I'm biology, biochemistry, and it happened to me to be the president of the Brazilian Biochemistry Society in 2009, 2010, for a 2-year presidency. I was the president of the Biochemistry Society here in Brazil. And then I realized, and I thought that it would be interest to approach our society to the American Society of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, ASBMB. And then I thought at that time that one possibility would be that we could build together an advanced school in a team that would be interesting to our both societies. So then I invited people from the director of ASBMB, the American Society of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. They came to Brazil, and we together decided a team, a subject, of course, in our specific area, biochemistry, that would be interested to Brazil and to US. And then we realized that biofuels would be an interesting theme. Brazil is very strong, as you know, in clean energy, in biochemistry, here in the ethanol and ethanol production. In fact, we are very strong. Biochemistry here, we are very strong in this area. So after talking a lot about the team, we converged to the biofuels that would be interested. The Americans would learn about a lot, the American students, and also we Brazilians would be very interested in build such a school. And then, okay, having a team, we decide to design, the school that we want. And so the school was exactly as all other schools, but the fact that we decided that first, it would be this school would be interested to if you have all people together for a week, like confined in a very nice environment. So the team was biofuels, so it would be interesting to have in a nice environment. And then we choose Ubatuba. In fact, it's a resort. Itamambuca resort is around 2 or 3 hours from Rio and from São Paulo, so it's very close by, these two centers, Rio and São Paulo, and it was wonderful, the experience to have. So, everything that I learned, that was the first lesson that I took from this experience. So having the people conviving for a whole week together, having lunch, students and professors discussing their projects for a week, it was the first very interesting decision that we took, and I think that was right. It was a good decision. So, and then of course I'm not from the biofuel field, so I'm biochemist, but this is not my subject. So for me, it was very hard to identify the good people in world doing research in biofuels. So we have a very good committee, a scientific committee, steering scientific committee that helped us a lot. So it was myself and the vice president of the society that is a colleague of mine from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. So then we try to identify all branches on biochemistry of biofuels that we could identify people doing the state-of-art research worldwide. So after identifying these good guys, of course they were invited, some accepted, got proud to be here and very easily accepted our invitation. Of course, a group, because of the agenda problem, they couldn't come. And then that was the second part, so have the best people doing the state-of-art, in terms of biochemistry of biofuels. And then the third part that I think that was a good decision that we took was that concentrate the classes. We ask people, the professors, so please don't come telling the students your last results. We want classes, discussing everything that has around this theme, biofuels, biochemistry of biofuels, but we want not only to show graphs and paper published. We want that sense, what's behind all the studies, the theory that is behind all the projects that you are conducting in your respective labs. So, and then all the classes were concentrated in the morning part, the morning section. So every professor gave around 3 or 4 classes during the week. 2 hours more or less was the time of each class. But in the afternoon, so what was very nice, because we had 60 students from all parts of the world, Africa, Asia. The majority was from Brazil, of course American, because it was a partnership between both societies. And in the afternoon, after lunch, around 4 o'clock, being precisely from around 3, 4 o'clock to 6, we asked the students to bring their research. All the students were somehow involved, of course, doing research in this specific subject. And we asked them to build, not like a PowerPoint, paper. Come to Brazil, to this school, with graph, all the bottlenecks that we have conducting our projects, because we want to discuss what we have, what are the problems that you are facing that could be solved in this such a select audience. So that was very nice. So it was 5 days, Monday to Friday. So every day we divided the class in, let's say 6, 7 groups. One professor with a group of 5, 6 students. I don't know exactly the number. And so these students present in sheets, paper. So I have these, I'm facing this problem, I cannot know, in my case, the pH, and so I cannot clone this protein, so please. And I have the same problem. It was a very, very rich discussion. The next day, the groups mixed, and the student presented again, but to another eyes, so, and then it was exactly the same. And so after I guess that this was the main point of our school. I have to say, because after, of course, we evaluate. And since today, the students write to us asking, please do the second edition. So after being in this school, I solved my problems. Now they created a net that now they can communicate. And since these schools, when they have an experimental problem, they can talk with each other. Unfortunately, I left the presidency of the society, and so it was not there wasn't a second edition. Now I'm the president of the graduate studies in my university, and I'm really sad that we don't have a second edition of that school. But so my advice, and what I learned from this unique experience, was put the people together for a whole week, having lunch. We have partied during the night, very nice, invited people to dance together, to play together, to talk together. So leave space to students to talk, to solve their own research problems, and ask people to give classes to the students, books. Well, because it's a lot of work organizing such a school. So I'm not the president of the society. So, and people change; they have different ideals, and so the actual president, I don't think understood that this was a good. It's really a pity, I would say. So Anna, that's what I want to share with you. I don't know if it was.
No, excellent. We should do one of this kind of experience. Wonderful. Okay. Manuel Heitor, please.
Thank you very much. I will speak also in English. I'll try to concentrate in some experience and proposals in a specific area of technology and policy. And when I mean by technology and policy, is essentially topics in issues of science, technology, and public policy in which the interaction between technology, the humans, and institutions are of central importance. That is where the topic I will essentially focus, and I mean by that technology policy. In the last, say, 10 to 15 years, I've been either organizing and participating in a number of School of Advanced Studies in this area. And let me give you, I selected 3 examples. One is so-called the Technology Policy and Management Consortium. It's a doctoral consortium established with MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Lisbon, Delft, Twente, George Mason University, and Tsinghua, the School of Management and Public Policy, where essentially the goal was to meet students for about 3 to 4 days, and essentially very much concentrated on student presentations and interaction among students in a way essentially to discuss ongoing doctoral research projects. Another model I've been involved since we created the so-called GlobalX network in the year 2000, and we organized since 2004 so-called GlobalX PhD Academy, which was a 2 weeks School of Advanced Studies by bringing together PhD students, interfacing and a mix between the presentation and discussion of student projects with classes, very much in the way it was just presented. That school started in Lisbon for a number of years between 2004 and 2007, then moved to Finland, and now it is very much located here in Rio de Janeiro and Brazil, and I believe that Marina will speak about the very last recent organizations, actually a few months ago, by José Cassiolato and the Institute of Economy. Another experience of so-called Transatlantic Policy Consortium, which has been held since 2003 at Indiana University, again bringing a number of American and European groups above all, essentially for a 3-day, again, student-based research presentations mixed with a few faculty to discuss those student presentations. So I just want to bring to you some experience of different models, and certainly there is not a recipe for organizing schools of advanced studies, but in these terms and very much in this area, which is very specific of some theoretical background, but definitely the practice of policy research, I would like to propose a concentration in, I will say, 3 main topics, which I will listen, and then I will also try to very briefly discuss a few ideas for practical implementation. And this has been written in a text which is available in the website. The topics themselves, and actually very much under the context of the discussion earlier today, this morning, the first topic I would like to propose is essentially the idea of transforming R&D and human capital into productivity gains. This is not trivial, as also I referred to it earlier this morning, and actually it depends very much from the specific context, certainly institutional context, but also the human resources and the process to contact markets at different regional, local, and international context. And therefore, although there is a widespread view, namely among economists, that this kind of investment in R&D and human capital is too costly, at least for the economic efficiency gains in some zones of the world, I will argue that this is a too naive and superficial approach, and therefore it does require a long-term view, which gains a lot from comparative studies in different zones. Essentially, a School of Advanced Studies could help PhD researchers and postdoctoral researchers first to identify factors which explain the evolution of productivity, but also a critical and comparative review of case studies in different zones, and certainly the identification, design, and discussion of policies towards endogenous development of developing regions in many different zones, and therefore avoid the idea of a recipe against comparative analysis in different case studies. The second topic, which has gained an enormous attention worldwide, not only in developing zones like in many other countries like Brazil, but also in the so-called developed world, which is the new conditions for industrialization, very much under a context where the national systems of innovation is losing ground in terms of international knowledge and value networks. Certainly, these overall issues, again, will gain a lot from comparative studies, namely in terms of the geography and dynamics of economic development and specialization in different zones, in a way towards guiding the creation of socioeconomic resilience, but also by looking at the structure, geography, and dynamics of supply chains and knowledge networks in different sectors and markets. Essentially, by sectors, I certainly call areas like the automobile or the aeronautics, but also the oil and gas industries, if we look, for instance, in Brazil. Again, it's easy to recommend industrialization. It has been very difficult in practice to put policies to really foster local industrialization, and certainly Europe at large is an interesting case study to really identify how industrialization has been centralized in some specific zones. My third and last topic, which I certainly refer in the area of technology and policy, is what I will call by strengthening the pillars in terms of science policies emphasizing the advanced qualification of human resources, and overall the need to again compare specific instruments in different parts of the world, rather than just recommending recipes that have worked in some zones but will never be able to work out in different zones. And therefore, by building a School of Advanced Studies essentially on strengthening the pillars in terms of training and scientific development, we can identify and compare instruments to promote those areas, review case studies, and essentially discuss policies in different parts of the world. To conclude, let me propose a few innovative ways which actually we are developing nowadays with colleagues also in Russia, particularly with the School of Higher Economics in Moscow, and with colleagues in China, I hope also in Brazil, namely with colleagues in Tsinghua and in the Hong Kong University. And therefore, the overall goal is that we need to have new field work and new research data in many zones worldwide which have not been subject to in-depth research or field work. And therefore, the goal is to, prior to bringing PhD and postdoctoral researchers together for a school, is to essentially involve them in, say, short-term field work, 2 to 4 months, so that they do new data acquisition, new field analysis, and then bring these people together to discuss in a comparative way different experiences and different field studies in many and different developing zones, either in Latin America or in Asia. And this could be one way to, year after year, to facilitate the collection of new data, but also to bring together people with experiencing field work in different developing regional contexts. Again, this is an idea to foster an advanced, a School of Advanced Studies together with what I will call policy fellowships programs or policy fellowships, which will allow students to do, and researchers in general, to do new research prior to bringing together them in a way to further discuss in a comparative way different technology and policy issues. I would say by that. Thank you.
Celia. Didn't start. I'm going to talk about something rather slightly different from our perspective. First of all, a few comments on schools of advanced studies, and then some suggestions of what could be focus, not a focus, but one side project. I would it would be a kind of off focus, to put it this way, in a much more sensible way. First of all, at present, I think that teaching and research and learning have to go all together in one way. It's not possible to separate anymore, especially at the level of advanced studies. So therefore, the two, I mean, there is, as was pointed out, almost no difference between the teachers and students at some stage at that advanced level. And I remember that many years ago, when I was a graduate student, our professor, who was the head of the program, used to say that the best way of learning something is to teach it. So what he did is make the students teach. And actually, we led a seminar in which the professors were the students among all of us, and it turned out quite well. Since then, I have been involved in a variety of exercises, some of them more directly linked to science and technology policy. In 1973, I was asked to coordinate the first large-scale research network on science and technology policy. It was the Science and Technology Policy Instruments Project, financed by IDRC, by the OAS. We had Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Venezuela, Peru, Egypt, India, Macedonia, not Yugoslavia, Macedonia at that time, and South Korea, which is very important. And this was 73. And just to give an idea, the South Korean coordinator was Kung Mo-chung, who was the Minister of Science and Technology twice in South Korea for a total of 12 years, and is considered the father of the scientific and technological revolution of China. And if any one of you is interested, we are going to have a meeting 40 years after we started the project. It's going to take place in 2 or 3 months, a month and a half from now. And I just got a letter from Kung Mo-chun indicating exactly what is it that the STP project did for Korea. And I don't want to quote it now, but if some of you are interested, I'll be very happy to do so. When that project was finished by the end of 79, we fed in all the results, and Ana Maria was a witness of that, into the UN Conference on Science, Technology and Development. We were asked, and I was charged as one of the consultants to write the secretariat paper of the UN for the UN conference. So all the results of what we got, by the way, the coordinators in Brazil were Fabio Herber and José Tavares. Those two very, very well known. And the other people in various places, I mean, have gone up, in Chaparro, in Colombia, and so on and so forth. So, but anyway, after that finished, we were able to feed into the policy process. Unfortunately, and this is something that we have to take into consideration when thinking of research and its results, after the UN Conference on Science and Technology approved the Vienna Program of Action, and we set up a fairly large fund of money and everything else, a minor thing happened along the way. Ronald Reagan was elected. Well, anyway, and we had a commitment from the Carter government and not from the Reagan government. After that, I went back to Peru and we set up a think tank called GRADE, Grupo de Análisis para el Desarrollo, Grupo de Análisis para el Development. And it has been going now, it's more than 30 years old, has won 3 times the Global Development Prize as the best think tank and best research over the last 30 years. And that time, what we wanted to do is to do academic research, independent, but linked indirectly to universities. Universities were not the right place to be at that time. After that, and Robert Wade knows about that, I went to the World Bank and set up the Strategic Planning Division with the help of Colin Bradford and other friends. And we did, it was a think tank within the World Bank looking, among other things, at the World Bank in the 90s. I just went back to the papers that, you were one of the commentators, Robert, I remember very well. And I'm writing a book called Back to the Future, in which I go back to all the predictions I made since 1970 in my paper. And it's very interesting to see how much of it happened. But anyway, I could explain in detail why is it that we sort of were right on some things in others not. And then I had 2 other examples. As of 92, we ran a 10-year project on development strategies for Peru called Agenda Peru, which did a sort of a huge consultative process with more than 150 meetings organized, town halls, 3 nationwide opinion polls, 22 batteries of focus groups, interaction, produced 20 or 30 books, and ended up This was done during the time of Fujimori, and one of our premises was democratic governance is important for development. It's not just the technical efficiency of government. As you can imagine, we were not very popular with Fujimori at that time, but when he left the country and fled to Japan, 2 weeks later was the time when we presented our final results, a final project, which was taken by Valentin Paniagua and the provisional government. So once again, one never knows what happens with those things. And there are other examples I'll skip. But anyway, what do I take as a lesson of all these many experiences in doing action-oriented research, teaching, and so on and so forth? I think that we are at a very special time in the history of the human civilization and of humanity. This is much more profound than we realize. We listen bits and places, some ideas, the complexity, the interactions, the speed, the spread, the second and third order consequences, all of those are creating a complete sort of turbulent setting, an institutional chaos almost, which requires a different mode of relating to the world we live in and learning and acting upon it. I think we're going to need to offer new interpretations, new narratives that help to make sense to the turbulent world and which can guide policy and also can guide even our own appreciation of what we are in. If that is the case, I would suggest that the task for a School of Advanced Study is to direct a small amount. I won't say all. We heard so many good research projects this morning and yesterday, but 5%, 10% of your resources to really think over the very, very long term in very bold ways in different directions that we normally think about that. You know, that doesn't mean that you forget about policies. I mean, I've been involved doing policy while doing this research and running a fund for science and technology, but at the same time you have to think on these other things. What are some of those examples that force us to rethink that? First of all, we heard yesterday about geopolitics and security. We have a completely new setting. I mean, who would have imagined that cyber war between China and India never represents a very real threat, which can stop? Well, it already stopped the reactors in Iran, as you remember with some of the... this is a major new sort of arena for warfare, the possibility of the spread of small-scale nuclear weapons. So that changes completely geopolitics and security. We have also heard this morning more than once the radical alteration of ecosystems that support life. Climate change. You know, the last report of the World Bank, 4 degrees centigrade, which basically projects is the average temperature of the world goes up 4 degrees, which is quite possible and something it's already on the way. The basis of our present civilization will be eroded severely in a major way. Deforestation, the problems of water supply. We know that 30 years from now, unless something breakthrough comes, we're going to face water scarcity, the loss of diversity, the problems of instability in food supply. That's the second one. Third one, demographic and social change. The demographic imbalances we are facing at present with aging and so on, the fertility rates of most women all over the world are below replacement levels. So in some countries we are already facing decline, Italy, Japan, Spain, definitely. So populations are going to shrink. And this is going to lead to tremendous pressures for migration, which once again, geopolitical issues, security issues will come into the fore. So that is really going to be a complicated problem over the next, well, add urbanization to that in 20 years, about 3 or quarters or 8. These situations have never happened in the history of humanity before. We're facing a completely new thing. In economics, we heard quite a few things in there. Frankly, when I hear some of my good friends talk about employment, full employment, and this and the other, I ask myself, you know, I come from Peru. In Peru, 70% of the labor force is informal, and about 75% generate their own jobs. So it's not a job or an employment in the traditional sense. It's what I've been calling, instead of jobs, it's sort of a labor entrepreneurship. Each worker is his own entrepreneur to create things. I mean, fit that into any of the models we have heard this morning. Doesn't make any sense. And it's not only in Peru, it's all everywhere. And here we talk about the formal model and informal economy and how to formalize and so on. It simply won't happen. And this is getting extremely complicated. Now, what it does, it forces you to have a different strategy, not so much of generating formal jobs, but how do you help the people that generate their own jobs? And the issue of productivity that you mentioned comes in, well, the issue of support. The state policies that are required for that are very different from state policies to get formal firms to have more jobs, which will have no impact in the long run in countries like mine in employment. The issue of public goods. And then a terrible thing, I mean, in the last book that I wrote, and then at the end I quote some of these, some of the scary things that some people, very reputable people, are thinking. I hear all of you to talk about growth. There are those who hypothesize that growth is no longer a viable business over the medium and long term. And the scariest thing that we have to do is to think of an economic and political system and social system in which growth, as we know it, is no longer viable. How would you organize society in those terms when you cannot outgrow your problems because you hit certain limits of resources, people, and a variety of other things that emerge in there? Anyway, the issue of guaranteed minimum income, which is making headway in Germany, the question of changing forms of accumulation, Anna raised the issue of public goods, all of this in economics. Yeah, if all of that weren't enough, on top of that are the changes in gene therapy that are emerging, which for the first time put within our hands the capacity to direct biological evolution, not only cultural evolution, which we have done up to now. You are working on stem cell research and gene therapy. You, over the next 20 or 30 years, will be able to choose the genetic makeup. I mean, this is what biochemistries tell me, and biologists and gene therapists. Well, who would we have access to that? It's going to be the few and the very rich and the knowledgeable. And who are not going to have access to that? The vast majority in the world. So some science fiction, but not so science fiction writers, are thinking of a possible divergence of the human species over the next century or so. What does it mean? It's a fundamental change. If that weren't enough, the issue of artificial intelligence, if you take seriously someone like Ray Kurzweil, this crazy inventor who's now the head of new projects at Google, and who talks about and written several books about the singularity. For him, the singularity is the moment where the aggregate of non-biological intelligence reach the same level or surpasses the aggregate of biological intelligence. And given the advances in this could happen, according to him, about 2035.
Seriously?
No, but I do pay attention to him. Now, if you don't pay attention to him at your peril, now you believe that is going to happen is a different thing. But what are the byproducts of that? New ways of seeing, new ways of enhancing your sort of neural activity. There is even if it doesn't happen, the sort of byproducts of all of that are now already altering the way in which medical processes are being produced. Once again, whom they will be available to? The rich in those countries and the knowledgeable. And the gap between the rich and knowledgeable on the one hand and the poor and non knowledgeable is getting bigger and bigger. So once again, give 2, 3, or 4 generations. I could give you many more examples, Robert, but I don't want to tire you. Add to that information and communications technology, the radical change in human interaction. Whoever believes that cultural evolution is the same in the post-internet era, Facebook, virtual reality, and so on, is the same as it was before, I think he's really kidding himself or herself. It's a different, accelerated, much more communicated, we're exposed to much more. The avalanche of information makes it extremely difficult to do. And then finally, knowledge and innovation, the way in which we generate knowledge and so on are changing. Knowledge, technology, and production are getting closer. The public sector in aggregate at the world level is reducing its participation in investment in research and development. Put all of that together, and the first conclusion you rise is this affects us all. Not only developing countries, affects rich, poor countries, it affects everybody. Second, so we are all in the same boat, really. Second, each of these dimensions on their own is sufficiently big to really cause disruptions. Put all of them together at the same time in a closely interconnected world and happening very fast, well, God knows what is going to happen. I mean, it's really, I don't think that we can predict anything about that. And I won't quote you. I was telling Emily, James Martin, the founder of James Martin Institute. Those are my 15 minutes. So I will just end very quickly. I can quote many things. People like Sir Martin Rees, the former royal astronomer and former president of the Royal Society, is on writing saying the probability that our civilization, as it is now, ends the 21st century as it is now is about 50-50. How do we prepare for that? God knows. I think that this means, among other things, and this is the research agenda for that 5%, this crazy thing is, you have to rethink what development and progresses are. It's no longer what we thought of, increases in the quality of life, income per capita, growth, and so on, distribution, the Keynesian versus Schumpeter. Wonderful. We need all of that, and we must continue. We can't abandon that. But you have to think a little bit more about that. We need to understand the nature and the transition we are embarked in. We don't know how to do that. We also need to assess where do we stand. And the hypothesis that I have is, given that all those changes are taking place, I took a quick look at various regions of the world who had the capabilities to respond. I mean, the physical, geographical capabilities. And by the way, the region that comes ahead of all the rest, lo and behold, is South America. If you take a look at population, biodiversity, diversity of diversities, energy, water, and so on, then take any other region of the world. Do a list of all the assets that will be needed, and then you'll see that in most cases, South America comes ahead. The only problem is we're full of South Americans, and that's what really creates a problem. Anyway, so let me just finish by saying we need to invest in a fundamental rethinking. Giovanni talked about, in his paper, about grand historical conjectures. Well, let's engage in trying to do something based on the information that we have. Benjamin Correa talked about new visions, new actors, new institutions, new ideas. Let's take a little bit those ideas. And my suggestion, I have some proposals for this new narrative, but let me end up with two quotes from a good friend and mentor of mine and master of mine who I was very fortunate to study under, is Eric Trist, which is probably not very well known. He was the founder of the Human Relations Center at the Tavistock Institute in London. And then he came to teach at UCLA and then at Penn. And he had two phrases that had really stayed with me. The first one sounds a little bit arrogant, but this is for the business where we are all in. He said that the business or the function of an intellectual is to produce the ideas with which other people think. In other words, we better have good ideas and disseminate them so that other people can apprehend the times we are in, can design the policies that make sense. And the second thing, and this is really square for the type of students that you need to prepare, he said, in order to face the challenges of the future, we need flexible, resourceful, resilient people who can tolerate a lot of surprise and ambiguity emotionally while continuing to work on complex issues intellectually. Thanks very much.
Marina Shapiro. Let's see. Someone has the, over there.
Oh, it was broken by animal spirits. Yeah.
Broken by animal spirits. Yeah, okay.
Rationally.
First of all, I would apologize for speaking in Portuguese because I'm not prepared to speak in English, so sorry about that. Meu nome é Marina Shapiro, eu sou professora do Instituto de Economia da UFRJ e faço parte do grupo de pesquisa Rede SIST, que é a Rede de Pesquisa em Arranjos e Sistemas Produtivos Inovativos Locais, que aqui no Brasil é, digamos assim, o braço do Globelix, né, que é a rede global para a economia do aprendizado, inovação e sistemas de construção, de desenvolvimento de competências. A minha apresentação, vou falar rapidamente sobre a rede SIS, e a ideia principal é falar um pouco sobre a experiência do Globelix Academy, né, que eu acho que é o que tem de interessante aqui nessa mesa. A rede SIS é uma rede interdisciplinar, formalizada em 97, no Instituto de Economia, coordenada pelo Cassiolato. A gente trabalha principalmente com a abordagem neo-schumpeteriana e, basicamente, né, com o conceito de sistema de inovação. Aqui no Brasil, tem diversos grupos que estão ligados e fazem parte da rede SIS, desenvolvendo projetos conjuntos. Só para ter uma ideia um pouco, né, esses são os principais projetos, principalmente comparativos na área de sistema local de inovação, arranjo produtivo local, que é a nossa principal linha de pesquisa, junto com política de inovação e Sistema Nacional de Inovação. E o que eu gostaria de falar um pouco mais detalhadamente é a nossa inserção no Globelix. O Globelix é uma rede mundial, acho que a maior parte das pessoas que estão aqui conhecem, de pesquisadores, acadêmicos e outros profissionais que utilizam a abordagem analítica de sistema de inovação. Ela foi uma rede criada em 2002, pelo professor Lundvall, o Manuel Heitor já mencionou aqui rapidamente. O objetivo central dessa rede é contribuir para a criação e troca de conhecimento acadêmico na área de inovação e desenvolvimento. Para isso, existe diversas formas, que eu vou falar um pouco, para a promoção da discussão e troca de experiências sobre temas relacionados sobre questões metodológicas, resultados empíricos e analíticos, além da implementação de políticas que utilizam a abordagem de sistema de inovação, e também busca-se contribuir para a organização e difusão de informações relevantes sobre os trabalhos desenvolvidos em diferentes regiões. Sorry.
There's a friction. There's friction. There's a static.
Tem na estática.
No, it's good now. It's good. It's good. Go close again.
Tá. Posso ir? Is it okay? Okay, sorry. Bom, as principais atividades no âmbito da rede Globelix são conferências anuais. A primeira conferência aconteceu aqui no Rio de Janeiro, aqui no BNDES, em 2003, e a última foi na China, em 2012. Quer dizer, a ideia é que esses objetivos do Globelix eles são desenvolvidos ou são implementados a partir de três grandes formas, né? A primeira seria através dos encontros nas conferências anuais, né, onde são apresentados artigos, enfim. Na realização de projetos específicos que envolvem a colaboração internacional para a realização de pesquisa comparativa. Um desses principais projetos é o projeto BRICS, que é um estudo comparativo entre os sistemas nacionais de inovação do Brasil, da Rússia, da Índia, da China e da África do Sul. Esse projeto ele também é coordenado aqui pela rede SIS e já contou com diversos apoios, como o IDRC, aqui no Brasil a FINEP, o CGE. E esse projeto ele é desenvolvido a partir do desenvolvimento de trabalhos, de estudos, de seminários. E em cada país, cada um dos 5 países, esses trabalhos são realizados por grupos locais, né, por professores e pesquisadores locais. Já nesse período de 2006 até agora, ocorreram diversas reuniões no Brasil, na África do Sul, na China, para a discussão dos principais resultados do projeto. E o principal, né, para o interesse aqui da mesa, da discussão da mesa, é o Globelix Academy. Né, quer dizer, o Globelix Academy é um encontro realizado, né, é um curso de 2 semanas de duração. Ele vem ocorrendo desde 2004 até 2012, esse ano 2013 também vai acontecer na Finlândia. Já ocorreram 8 edições, esse ano será a 9ª edição, 5 edições aconteceram em Lisboa, 2 na Finlândia e a última foi aqui no Brasil em 2012. Esse curso ele ocorre, né, como eu falei, em 2 semanas. São selecionados aproximadamente 30 alunos de todos os países do mundo. Ou seja, a gente mistura, né, uma mistura entre estudantes provenientes de países desenvolvidos, países de desenvolvimento. Em geral, né, todos esses alunos trabalham, né, ou estão desenvolvendo tese na área de sistema de inovação e desenvolvimento, são temas relacionados a sistema de inovação e desenvolvimento, e o formato do curso num primeiro momento, ocorrem aulas com alguns professores, em geral os professores que estão ligados à rede Globelix. Essas aulas são de alguma maneira misturadas com as apresentações dos alunos. Então, os alunos trazem os trabalhos que são apresentados na seleção, eles são apresentados aqui quando, né, se desenvolve o Globelix Academy. Para cada trabalho, quer dizer, a gente organiza os trabalhos em mesas temáticas, onde alguns professores, né, 1 ou 2 professores, são responsáveis pela coordenação da mesa, das apresentações do trabalho, e outros estudantes são encarregados de ler os trabalhos e comentar os trabalhos. Então, é uma oportunidade muito interessante de troca de experiência, de discussão, essa mistura de aulas com apresentação dos trabalhos dos alunos, com comentário dos professores especialistas nos temas, né, sobre os trabalhos, e também de troca, interação entre os próprios alunos, né, essa convivência durante 2 semanas no mesmo local, né, quer dizer, as pessoas ficam todas hospedadas no mesmo hotel, enfim, é muito interessante, né? Esse ano a gente organizou o Globelix Academy aqui no Rio, inclusive a realização foi aqui no BNDES, né, a gente teve o apoio do BNDES, e quem financiou foi o Ministério da Ciência e Tecnologia. Cada local, né, que recebe o Globelix Academy, assim como as conferências do Globelix, é responsável por conseguir, digamos assim, apoio, né, para financiar as principais despesas de passagens, de estadia, etc. É interessante também chamar a atenção que os professores que vêm, quer dizer, a gente consegue, né, ou busca conseguir o apoio financeiro para pagamento de passagens, hospedagem, etc., alimentação. Aqui no Brasil não foi muito fácil, mas, enfim, felizmente a gente conseguiu o apoio. E os professores não recebem honorários, né, quer dizer, são as pessoas que fazem parte da rede e vêm participar dando as suas aulas. Como eu já falei, quer dizer, a próxima edição vai ser realizada na Finlândia. Em 2011 ficou definido, quer dizer, até 2012, todas as edições do Globelix Academy tinham sido realizadas em países na Europa, né, Portugal e Finlândia. Em 2011 definiu-se pela alternância, né, dos locais de realização entre países desenvolvidos e países em desenvolvimento. Então, no ano passado foi no Brasil, esse ano vai ser na Finlândia, e eu acho que ainda não existe a definição do próximo ano. Eu acho que seria isso, e agradeço aí a oportunidade de participação. Obrigada.
My proposal is to continue with the presentations of schools and research projects, so we can have a discussion at the end. Also merge the 2 sessions. Can we? Yeah, I think this can be more productive, okay? So please, first Luiz Bevilacqua, and then Barry Norton. Okay, but first Luiz Bevilacqua. Luiz, please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'll do this. But first I have to open this thing. Yeah. Okay, fine. Thank you very much, Ana Célia, for inviting me to participate in this meeting. My name is Luis Bevilacqua. I am in the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro now. I was there and previously, then I retired. Now I am emeritus professor. And as a matter of fact, I'm working in Federal University of Rio to implement some ideas and some project that is very similar to what I'm going to present this afternoon. But I'd like to concentrate this afternoon in this very new experience, which the Federal University of ABC, situated in São Paulo. I was in the chair of the implementing committee, so I'd like to show you very interesting aspects. And to start with, I'd like to say that the ideas that are sustained by this university were proposed about 20 or 25 years ago at the Federal University of Rio. And, but it was almost impossible to implement there. Now I'm working in something similar together with Professor Deborah Fogel, which is the Vice President for Graduate Studies. So, first of all, let's see what are the cornerstones, what is driven this new technology and new science. I apologize also for presenting this topic in the fields of hard science and technology, because this university was initially aimed to hard science and technology. So, in this first couple of slides, I'd like to show you what were the motivation, the basis to implement these new ideas. First, what has driven the science and technology so far? In my opinion, we have two main columns. One is the ability to make scientific observations. 100 years ago, we had very, very poor means to go into the microcosmos and the macrocosmos. Nowadays, it's amazing what we can do with these force microscopes and telescopes installed in the satellites. In the second column is computational capability. It's also something that it's fantastic, and we cannot say when it's going to stop increasing this velocity of processes and memory of new computers. So these are the two main columns that I think were driven this new science and new technology, as I like to say. Just to give an example, this is a new image of pentacene. Pentacene is a chain of carbon, and here's you can see really an image taken by the people in IBM with using a force microscope. And the other one is, oh no. Okay. Okay. This is another one. I like it very much. It's Eta Carina, which is probably binary stars, exploding star to form new objects, stellar objects, just to show you. Well, due to this advance in science and the way people are working out complex problems, the barriers between science, the different topics, I'd like to, and engineering, for instance, and social sciences, hard science, they were broken. There is no, it's very difficult to say what is mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, civil engineering, materials, and also physics, chemistry, and so on. Not only this, but also barriers among the social science and engineering, social science, and hard science and engineering they are broken. Just to give you, excuse me, just to mention an interesting example, because people here are, some of people, I understand, they are in economics. I'm sorry about the technical details, but I don't go very much into this. But just to explain you that there is a very famous model called Black-Scholes. The Black-Scholes model that has been used for several years, at the very end has shown to be a failure. And maybe one of the reasons that can explain this failure is that the Black-Scholes model, this who tries to model the capital flow, has just one speed. The capital flows just in one direction. So, but it's possible, and this is what I just to mention, it's possible to have another model that is based on bimodal flow. That is, we have capital flowing from one side to the another and the other way around. See, and this gives a completely difference in the behavior of the economy. This we are going to explore. We have trying to establish a group that are going to maybe to work in this. Okay, and this started with, and here is the reason we have a different. We have a different terms that would explain this kind of capital flow. This means flow concentration, and this means flow concentration. But we have here another term that is a flow distribution. Okay, thank you. So just to give you an example, how mathematics and economics and political and social science appear, right? Can interact. This started with a malaria model. This was designed to based on population dynamics, which has this kind of diffusion problem also. And based on this, we can find maybe a model that explains better this how the economy goes. Here's in green, in upstairs here we have a good economy, and in yellow things are bad. You see. And on this axis, there is stagnation. You see what this model with biflux is. It's interesting. They forecast the following. We can be here in a point like A. The economy is going very well, right? But if the external flow of capital starts decreasing, you go to a region where the economy goes very bad. But this R means the taxation. Then you can reduce taxation and go up again. Well, there are several possibilities that this model explains, right? And I think it's interesting because we have this two flows in two ways. Well, let's be back to our original topic about the cultural era that we are living now. It's well recognized that we are living in era of knowledge. But I would say that's much more complicated than that. We are living in an era of cultural shock. What is a cultural shock? Cultural shock is this. This is, I'm sorry, engineers like to give some examples. This is technically a shock wave. This see, it's really a shock wave. Means that the past is trying to squeeze into the future, you see? And this forms a shock wave. And we are living living in shock wave. And what we can do in the shock wave, we cannot swim. If you are living in a shock wave, we have to surf. We have to think very serious about that. And swimming and surfing is not a new style of swimming. It's completely different. So if we want to face the new challenges, we cannot just make some small modification of the way we're acting now. Things have to go very, very deep. So I think it was mentioned before that this is, you mentioned before something like that. I agree very much what you said. So we require new skills, right? And I think it's a good image. So what happened? The tradition, and now I'm going to concentrate more in the university and the academy, right? The traditional university is gone. It's completed. We have a new era. It's not possible just to make some adjustments. We have to change it very, very deeply. Second, there's not much time to think and take decisions, unfortunately. We have to work very, very quickly. Third, we have to take risks. It's impossible nowadays to go ahead saying that we have to minimize our risks. It's not possible. But we have to be prepared to make a quick chance, because since we have to take risks, it's possible that something goes wrong. So we have to be prepared to take these new directions. It's necessary to challenge traditional rules, and this is, well, I'm talking now maybe about our country. We have so many rules, and that this is makes us impossible to move and to take new attitudes. So this has to be changed also. It's necessary to find a suitable board. If we want to sort, we have to have a board. For instance, this information technology, this is changing the world. This would be one on the board. And it's necessary to be prepared to fall down and get up again and start all over again. So this is what I think the characteristic of this new era, and we have to be prepared for this. So education for the future also, and this is, was a thing that was discussed in this implementing committee to this Federal University of ABC. We have to recover the appreciation for scientific learning. The students, it's not possible to prepare the students only to respond to market demands. We have to say that it's interesting, it's good to think and to understand try to appreciate nature and the mysteries in the nature. Because we are starving. People are very much concerned with poverty, right? People are starving, but there is a kind of intellectual starvation. You see, and this leads to mediocrity. Mediocrity is very, very bad. Mediocrity leads to a nation that is mediocre. Is possibly to be dominated by other nations, and also mediocrity leads to violence, which is worst. So, also. The students, they have to be the freedom to explore new paths. It's important. It's very important for the students in this when they are still in the university to learn how to have their own choice. They have to face the life in the future, and this is a good time to exercise this capacity to have their own choice, to take risks, to accept challenges. Right. So. Now, I would like to point out three important topics that I think is fundamental for the university, and this was on the basis of this University of ABC. First one, learn rather than teach. The university, mainly today, must be a place intended primarily to learn, not to teach, you see. People have to learn. Information nowadays is all over. You can find information in several places, right? So we have to form an academic community. These sharp boundaries between professors, graduate students, undergraduate students, doctoral students, they have to be broken. We have to form an academic community. Probably those of you who have some interaction with university, undergraduate students are brilliant now. It's impossible to say you are undergraduate student and then you have to wait for some time to learn and to be in contact with the research, advanced. No, So we have now the opportunity to form this academic community and to focus these points that the university is a place that we should learn rather than teach. The second one is this one. Do not pour new wine in old bottles. See, interdisciplinary research has gained its place in the world. I think lots of success people from mathematics, modeling, biology, together with people in physics and chemistry, they join together. We have heard this several examples here, and they can do fantastic job. This has come to stay. Now, if you go mainly to undergraduate courses, they are taught as they were 40 years ago. I'll give you an example in my own area, engineering. When I studied, I have physics, 1, 2, 3, 4. Chemistry, 1, 2, 3, 4. Calculus, 1, 2, 3, 4. Computation, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you go now to my university and almost all universities in the world, you have what? Physics, 1, 2, 3, 4. Chemistry, 1. And we say interdisciplinary research is what we are working about. But this would be the most important agent in our research formation. But the students are confused. So we have to change this new the guidelines for undergraduate courses. I'm going to comment this a little bit later. And this is very important. New investments in the right place. Don't pour new wine, new money in old projects. It's terrible, and some people are doing this, putting lots of money in things that are already proved to be old. Does not work. We have to surf. You see, they belong to the past. This is very important for these agencies, right? For the funding agencies. Now, the third one is first discover, then publish. The impression what I have today, as the people first publish, then they are going to see if what they published fits into science, if it's a good project and if it's a good contribution to science. No, advancement of knowledge is not to improve the author's curriculum vitae, but to contribute to science. So, and this is due very much by the way that agencies evaluate the universities. So this has, I think it's a point that has to be changed also. We have to pay attention and give value really to scientific contents, not only the number of publication papers. Well, what could I say about this now with ABC project coming to the more specific points? I'd like to just to comment more these two first one. Abolition of departmental organization. This university has no department. It has only 3 schools. Second, new framework for scientific knowledge. It's not the guidelines are not physics, chemistry. What are then? Well, I don't have time to go to the other one, but so these schools, we have only these 4 schools. A School of Natural Sciences and Humanities, a School of Mathematics, Computation, and Cognition. Cognition is becoming very important nowadays, right? And the neurosciences. A School of Engineering and Applied Social Sciences. Of course, this humanity is very interesting to have here for humanities to get in the School of Natural Science, because we have some people from philosophy of science there, and they are enthusiastic because they are sitting together with physicists, chemists, biologists, and in the classical organization, the Department of Philosophy is there, and they are studying philosophy of science there, and people doing science is so separate, you see, and this was a very interesting experience. And how about the guidelines? The guidelines are not physics, chemistry anymore. It's a structure of matter. This is material sciences. Energy. transformation processes, communication and information. Here, communication information, you can get together people from hard sciences and computer science, and also in social sciences. Representation simulation, this is mathematics. Well, mathematics with some emphasis in modeling, because this is one of the best ways to implement interdisciplinarity. Humanities and social sciences. Then, if you have a guideline in structure of matter, for instance, you have to, well, we have to prepare undergraduate course. I'm talking about undergraduate course. In structure of matter, 2 or 3 courses, a sequence of 2 or 3 courses. We have to call physicists, chemists, engineers, and biologists to prepare this agenda. And they're going to join their knowledge. And then what happens at we are not going to have this terrible thing, thermodynamics for physicists, a book, thermodynamics for chemists, thermodynamics for engineers. There is just one thermodynamic, and the basic knowledge, the basic concepts should be taught, should be not as they are used for their specific needs, you see. Well, so these are the guidelines for this new university. I cannot go into much detail. Education, fostering creativity, more individual work and less classes. In this country, we think that teachers more important thing. If the student learns something else, the student, they have to have time to learn, right? Building self-confidence, it's also very important. The students, they have to be prepared to face a life in the future, and so they have a kind of training in these years in the university. Learning to take decision and initiative, less complaints and more solutions, right? It's not, we used to be just complain, but they have to find their own solutions also. This is one of the basis 3 points in the education there. And finally, I would like to mention the following. When we started this project, this was done under the Ministro Haddad, Fernando Haddad. He gave us very support, a strong support to go ahead with these new ideas. But my colleagues, some of my colleagues say, you are crazy, it's not going to work, it's impossible. In this committee that we started to make the final project of the university, about 10 or 12% of the person that I invited, they just left. I'm not going to cooperate in this committee because this is a crazy thing. I was once in Portugal presenting these ideas, and it's a very good friend of mine. He asked me, how about the evaluation? Do you have already results? It's not yet, it's only 2 years. Okay. And he was saying, it's not going to work. Well, and we wait 5-6 years. The university has 6 years now. And I'll show you the following. Last year, the Minister of Education, they published the result of the evaluation of universities in Brazil. And the only university in Brazil with mark above 4 is FABC. Besides that, 4 courses are evaluated best among all Brazilian universities. And more 3 or 4 are among the 3 first courses. It works. Then they say, well, okay, this is as far as education is concerned. I mean, the teaching and saying how the student perform. But how about research? Okay, how about research? Here is a graphic that shows you the quality means the importance and the prestigious of the journals. Very prestigious journals, they are here with very high grade. And here is citation. So it's a publication in journals of high quality and citations. Now, here you have this Harvard, this Stanford, MIT, Cambridge, CNRS in France, and so on. So it's over here. Here is FABC, just in the middle. Here are about 8 or 10 Brazilian universities in red square. They are very similar.
Where is the federal university?
It's around here. Not only federal, USP, for instance, the University of São Paulo, that they say it's in terms of production, number of papers. The USP, for instance, by far the first in Brazil. But if you go into quality, it's not very much different from the other ones. See, the only that is different is this UFABC. I'm sorry to say that. I'm not to looks like I'm arrogant and say that we are the best because I'm not there anymore. I'm going to put now the Federal University here together with Deborah Fogel.
But whose journal rankings did you use? Which journal?
No, this is.
Which journal rankings did you use?
No, this is a international organization, sir. If you go into the internet, Sir World Report 2012, they would say it's very detailed. You see, very complicated, but it's very interesting. Well, what I have to say also, this to be fair, this is the global evaluation of the universities. Of course, in each one here, USP, UFRJ, and so on, there are islands of excellence. This is something else, right? But we are talking about the university as a whole, okay? Well, so I think this is to show that it works. And I am trying to do this now in the Federal University of Rio. The difficulty is that when the university is ongoing, it's very difficult because we have all these councils. Starting from the scratch is quite different.
Luis, are you concluding?
Yes, I am just one slide. Okay? I'm sorry, I talk too much, I know. But okay, I think we should hear Bernard Shaw. Just read it. I think this is the way we should proceed nowadays. And finally, thank you very much, and let's surf. Thank you.
Barry, please, Bernard.
I really appreciate the really interesting presentations that have just been made. I've got, I think, a little bit of a split agenda here. How much time do I have? 10 minutes? 10, 15? Okay. Okay. Let me start out by representing my school. I teach at the University of California, San Diego, which is a large, it's a public university, of course, part of the University of California system. And what's distinctive about it is that it is a primarily science-dominated school that is one of the top 20 global universities by almost all rankings. Now, the thing that's striking about that is that it's the only one in the top 20 that's less than 50 years old. Actually, we're exactly 50 years old. So we're new. We're the new kids on the block. So perhaps we have some experiences that might be transferable. So let me try and distill a lot of complex experience into one very simple lesson. It might not be a lesson because it might not be transferable, but the experience that seemed to work at UCSD for whatever reason was essentially this. New people were lured to the school by the promise that they could set up a department and hire a few people that was highly focused on some particular aspect of their discipline which they were really good at and which they thought would be a key to building a department in the future. In other words, it was a unbalanced entrepreneurial strategy. And so when I wasn't involved in the startup at all. When I came to interview there for a job, the dean of social sciences asked me, he said, well, candidly, what do you think of UCSD? And I said, I don't know, to tell you the truth. I can't differentiate it that clearly from a bunch of other UC campuses like Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz and all that. And he said, okay. He said, now, what do you think of UCSD in economics? And I said, oh, that's easy. UCSD Econometrics, #1 in the country, outstanding department, it's really, really good. And it turns out that a similar answer to that, the way I responded to that question is the way most people respond. That is to say, UCSD built for about 30 or 40 years through a strategy of picking a specialization for each department, allowing that department to grow, as I say, in a sort of unbalanced way. And then only much later, trying to cover more of the bases, trying to do more, right? And so that was a relatively successful strategy during the period where we were building a new university. Now, I think this strategy had a limit and a cost. The limit, of course, was it worked well for an adolescent university, and when we got to a certain level of maturity and a certain size, then naturally each of these departments sought to broaden, have a broader base, and they lost some of their distinctiveness. So, for instance, now just to take economics, which I know well, it's still very good in econometrics, but it's not, it's no longer the sort of unambiguous leader in U.S. econometrics that it once was. It also had another cost, which I couldn't help but thinking about in reference to the very inspiring presentation we just saw, which is the undergraduate experience is not special, right? In a sense, this is a model that catered to the interests of faculty, and especially research-oriented faculty. So it was good in attracting them and building strong research-oriented departments, but it didn't necessarily translate into the kind of enthusiasm that we saw just in the previous presentation as potentially a kind of infectious niche that would really motivate an undergraduate learning experience. So part of the lesson I draw from that is there are really important trade-offs in building a new school. I mean, there are trade-offs between the kind of things that you do to attract faculty and the kind of things that you do to attract students, the kind of things that you do to set a world-class research agenda, and the kind of things that you do to ensure that there's a really good learning experience. Now, moving from the sort of UCSD experience in general to the specific place where I teach, I actually don't teach in the economics department. I teach in a graduate school of international relations and Pacific studies. So that might be even closer to the kind of advanced school that we're talking about here today. And here, I think we started the the School of International Relations and Pacific Studies. Terrible name, by the way, right? Because it's far too long to project as a coherent identity. It started with a very definite, a particular kind of mission, which was to be a school of international relations, but to have a clear Pacific focus. And I should say, by the way, for us, the Pacific has always included Brazil, which is a Pacific country, whether you know it or not, because our definition has always been East Asia and all of Latin America. So you got included, whether you knew it or not. And so, and also because we were away from Washington, we probably spend more time on thinking about private sector activities than some of our cohorts and competitors who are mostly on the East Coast and sometimes are much closer to jobs in Washington, D.C. So we had what we thought was a pretty clear niche or pretty clear focus in terms of the identity of the school, and I think it stayed with us ever since. But the thing we discovered quite quickly was you really need to spend, I think, a lot of time thinking about the job market that your students get launched into. And since I know absolutely nothing about the kind of job market your students will go into, let me just say a few words about the kind of job markets that our students go into. Job markets for us are so much divided into the job markets that master's degree students go to and the job markets that PhD students go to. Master's students go predominantly, for our graduates, a slight majority of them go into private sector jobs, and then a chunk to nonprofit sector and a chunk to government. So the set of skills that they need are really different from the PhD students. The set of skills that they need are, first of all, they need a strong management core. because they need accounting skills, finance skills, how to use Excel, but also how to evaluate decisions, how to evaluate public policies. There's just, there's so much to learn in the world that it's really critical to make sure that you're in a position to churn students out with a key, reliable set of skills that you can then market, with a straight face to a whole range of different employers. So that was certainly part of our experience. Then the other part is the PhD students. And, we discovered from the beginning, although we have about 25 times as many master's students as PhD students, we get almost as many applications for the PhD program as for the master's program. So a lot of people want to do research. A lot of people want PhDs. We can't possibly, so it's much harder to do the PhD program than it is to do the master's program. So that decision as to how you want the balance to be, assuming you want both, exactly where the balance is going to be. We've had a lot of sort of very interesting, inspiring talk about research directions. We can talk a lot more about it. But there is a much more pedestrian part of this, I think, that is a key to success at the same time in terms of, really having well-equipped managers and analysts coming out of the program. As far as the PhD program is concerned, I think we feel like there's two things that are crucial. And the first is data. I think increasingly in our world, data drives research, and data attracts students, and data attracts research projects. And I think we are moving, and I mean right now moving, not have moved, but I think we are moving right now towards, towards setting up institutions that facilitate keeping, collecting, sharing, and providing access to data. I think that's probably the right way to go. I mean, so much, it's, in a sense, it's so easy to manipulate data now, to analyze data, that just creates an explosion of demand for data and the kind of problems that we're interested in. And luckily, there is an explosion of data. So I think that it makes sense to think at the outset of how the school is structured around the creation and sharing of data. And that also leads to the second point, which I think, and then one other quick point after that. So the other thing I think that's essential is crossing borders. And so, of course, interdisciplinary work. But interdisciplinary work is really hard because interdisciplinary work has to be founded on high credibility in a given discipline first. And PhD students in particular, when they come out, most of them, depending upon where they go to work, but if they're going into academic careers, they go to work in another discipline. And so, we started out, when our school was founded, we actually had an interdisciplinary PhD program. And we eventually abandoned it. Not because we didn't have lots of applicants, we did, but because we were uncomfortable with telling somebody, here, come to our school, invest 5 years of your time, and come out with a degree that mixes economics and political science, knowing better than they did that in fact they were going to have to compete for a job in economics only, or a job in political science only, and that therefore, there are trade-offs in how you set up the interdisciplinary program. So I think I'll just end there. That's to say, there's a balance there too, between we all want to do interdisciplinary work. We know that's where some of the most creative insights come from, but we still have to stay tuned to disciplinary needs which have not yet gone away. So stop there.
We are going to have just one more presentation, and then we go to the coffee break, and then we have this. I'll give you also the floor for you, but first, Cristina. After the coffee break, yes.
I have a bias in my presentation because I come from the biomedical area. And so when I see the debate on the emergent properties of economic systems. I think also of emerging properties of complex health systems and ecosystem health. So we have many changes resulting from behavioral change, ecological change in the health field, affecting several epidemics like HIV/AIDS because of change in sexual behavior, or dengue because of ecological changes and the impact in dengue introducing different types of virus. So the emergent properties also require in the health field a transdisciplinary approach. I had the opportunity to participate when I was a fellow at Harvard University in the new disease group. It was a group, a transdisciplinary group with mathematicians, physicians, medical people, thinking on the emerging properties of complex systems in health. So when we discuss innovation, I look at this from the health perspective. And I've been working with innovation in health in the last 30 years. In Brasilia, in our National Biosafety Commission, and I was also head of the AIDS program, Science and Technology Unit. So we had the opportunity to identify several gaps in innovation policy, important gaps in policy making. And I was always amazed because I always see this wonderful debate on economic theory and innovation system. But at the same time, we identify a problem in the intervention, making policies work in real life. One thing is economic theory, another thing is to make effective intervention in real life. So we have been working. I'm now at Oswaldo Cruz Foundation. I coordinate the master and doctor degree program of IPEC in clinical research. And I am also advisor for Biomanguinho. So we have been working on innovation policies and strategies for drugs and vaccines in the BRICS, thinking about scenarios and prospects for Brazil in this area. We have just published an article in a journal called Vaccine, discussing these different policies, strategies, and the issues for Brazil. It's coming now in the International Global Week of Immunization. It's coming out this article. Well, okay. Okay. So we have many advances in science, in genome sequencing, genetic engineering, stem cell research, supporting several innovative healthcare strategies. But technological gaps, they still persist in the production of vaccines and drugs, affecting the poorest population in developing countries, particularly women and children exposed to very high mortality rates. So, for several types of drugs, like ARV drugs, the market is highly concentrated in few enterprises. The HIV/AIDS pandemics and the limited access of patients to the poorest countries, to the more expensive second and third line drugs, illustrate well the consequence of this market failure, this market excessive concentration. In the Western area, we have a similar problem. In the Western, we have a near monopoly market with new Westerners concentrated in few multinational enterprises, new innovative, intensive, and recombinant Western concentrated in few enterprises. And emerging market, the emerging bricks manufacturing are concentrating the production basically on traditional vaccine. So there is a division of labor. The new market going to, new vaccine going to the multinational, and the emerging manufacturers concentrating in traditional vaccines. So the challenge for the BRICS is to develop a strategy, new global and local governance strategies to strengthen the capacity of the BRICS, reducing the external dependence, increasing intellectual property flexibility, incentives, and patent pools. I understand, I think the debate this morning was very important. And I agree with Dennis Barbosa. I don't think the problem of innovation policy in Brazil is a problem of intellectual property or patent. The patent system has to be administrated, but the monitoring of the patent system should be done according to each specific product in the market. So we have in Brazil an underutilization of the full scientific and technological potential. The country has an enormous scientific and technological potential, but we have important gaps, particularly in the preclinical stage and technological platform. We have inadequate national innovation policy, and an issue that is very important, translational science. Translate basic research into product and process. This is a very important issue. We have absence of translational science approach. We have insufficient funding for science and technology. Only 1% of GDP should be at least 2.5%. Another problem in the innovation policy, we have a generalization of ideas. We don't have specific product-oriented policies and strategies by policymakers. Because these policymakers are usually economists, and they do not understand the biological issues and the biological process involved in the production. And there is also a problem of absence of structuring long-term projects for local development of vaccines and drugs. And the policy, intellectual property policy, should transcend the mission of the National Patent Office. So it's necessary to correct market failure in this area, reducing the concentration, the high costs, and the external dependence. We need to improve the legal and regulatory system. Vaccines are recognized as the most cost-effective interventions with low cost and high public health impact. However, the costs have increased exponentially in the last 2 decades in a global scale because of new recombinant vaccines. So several challenges and requirements have emerged. And the average expenditure in the 50 lowest income countries per capita has increased more than double in this country, dispensed with immunization. So we have many challenges for Brazil: brain drain, loss of personnel, lack of adequate capacity building, inadequate and irregular flow of national and international resources, constraint in infrastructure and equipment, and the lack of adequate conditions for quality control. So it's very important in the agenda of the School of Advanced Studies that we concentrate the agenda of the research in this frontier, technological frontier subject, and in the technological gaps, how we can undertake comparative research in order to identify in each one of these countries the main gaps and how to, and the strategies. I think this is very important. I was very impressed with China. I went to China for a seminar in the Tsinghua University on the emerging economies dialogue. And I was very impressed with the ability of China to build a national strategy, not only for technological development, but a long-term strategy until 2020 in China for the patent system, assessing the patent system, innovation, and a coordinated strategy. This is very important. In Brazil, we have many initiatives, but there is a need for a more coordinated central strategy. We have several international strategies with insufficient funding, advanced market commitment, and Gavi Alliance, Global Fund, Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, UNICEF, UNITAID Patent Pool, and an increased focus on translational research. So it's necessary to face the challenge in the governance of innovation, to realize the potential for innovation in this country, not only financial conditions, but create, this is a very important issue, to create an environment for innovation. I think in many aspects, China has succeeded to create an environment. In spite of the problems, of difficulties, China has succeeded to create an environment for innovation. And this means a cultural, a different cultural approach, and means also a national long-term strategy. So the capacity to manage risks for raising capital, building local capacity for long-term strategic planning in a multi-year product development perspective, taking into account the need to accelerate public and private partnerships. We have in Brazil very few. We have the law, we have all the instruments in place. The law, the institution, like the funding institutions like PNEP, the FAPs in the state. We have innovation systems, but we don't have enough public-private partnerships. It's impossible to have product development with the involvement of the private sector, the effective involvement of private sector. In the health field, we usually are suspicious of the private sector, and this culture should be changed. So my recommendations for Brazil, and this should be the subject of our Institute for Advanced Studies, to think how could you conceive for the Brazilian specific condition a national long-term strategic plan. And each one of the gaps I mentioned here should be listed and identified. We should compare how the different countries are dealing with these gaps and the strategic plan that are being put in place in each one of these countries. How are coordinating the funding sources, the diversification of the funding sources, strengthening R&D assessment. This is very important. Structuring project and technological platforms, and absence of structuring projects is a main gap in the biomedical area. And I think many policymakers don't realize this. We have several different funding from FINEP, from FAPERS, but these are pulverized funding. This is not strategic funding. We need strategic funding. We need a strategic policy to change the reality. Also, capacity building, particularly for policy making and assessment of science and technology. We have very few people in Brazil with the capacity to make policy, R&D policy, innovation policy. And we don't have follow-up of the funding. This is a serious problem in Brazil. We have many funding initiatives, sometimes even long term, but not adequate follow-up of this funding initiative. So quality control is very important. And so the main challenge is how to maintain the Brazilian redistributive model. We have discussed this in the first session. In a new knowledge society, we cannot be against the redistributive model. We should improve this redistributive model, but in a new approach to innovation, in a new knowledge society, where education plays a central role. I think this is missing in Brazil, a central role for education and for science and technology. This is the only way we can move from a redistributive project to a new knowledge society. Thank you.
Now let's go to the coffee break, and then we come back to new experiences. This is very fascinating. I'm going to give the floor to a couple of more presentations, but Emily asked me to tell a bit more about the Spiderweb for the next for the 2 next years, actually. We do have already, we are going to meet twice a year, at the beginning, February, March, and in July, August, just before classes started in Brazil, before the first and the second semester of classes. And we are going to have 3 professors coming twice a year, so 6 professors a year. Then we have to think about the postdoc school. So we are going to have an edital, we call edital, to open for postdoc students. So we have everything to define. We just don't know yet. And we are collecting suggestions. So all this brainstorm here is to hear about different experiences and then to think about. At the end of this session, I'm going to pick up some of suggestions that came about and try to make try to wrap up to a more concise or to have the suggestion to think about the Spiderweb prospects. But we do have already the enrollment of several professors for this term, the next in August. And the thing is that we can put together several networks of experiences in different institutions in Brazil, different programs and institutions in Brazil, connect all the networks, make the links between several networks that can profit from this opportunity to have this funding from CAPES and to build a school for advanced studies. So we are just, I mean, this is the time to open up, and then we can make an effort to pick up some good suggestions and think about what we're going to put in the Spiderweb project, okay? Take into consideration that the School for Policies, Innovation and Development Research Web. But let's continue to open the floor to these contributions. Emily, please.
Thank you very much. How long would you like me to speak for? Kind of 5 minutes? Yeah, perfect. So then we can be much more interactive. So I wanted to share today 2 projects that actually have been inspired and led by Nairi Woods, who many of you know. And I'll try and convey some of 2 very exciting projects. The first is a Global Leadership Fellow postdoc program we have in Oxford, which was started about 5 years ago. It's a joint postdoc between Oxford and Princeton, so it's a 1 year in each location. It's for non-OECD nationals, so we've had people from Africa, Nigeria, Niger, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Latin America here in Brazil, Bolivia, China, India, Vietnam, Azerbaijan, Georgia. So it's a very exciting group. It's normally 4 or 5 people each year. And the idea is we bring together scholar practitioners. So it's people that have got a very applied field of research, and they're asked to do 2 types of output. One is a policy output, and one is an academic output. So the idea is they come to Oxford and then to Princeton, they're able to network with each other, but also bring new ideas and new research questions that aren't getting addressed in Oxford or Princeton, and also to challenge a bit of the methodology that is being used within Oxford and Princeton in the disciplines. And then normally international relations or political economy, and we've also had lawyers, we've also had philosophers. And actually we've had a medic as well, sort of applied health. And the idea is that then, and one of the requirements actually for the application is that they go back to their own country. So the idea is to build sort of a network in developing and transition countries. And we can discuss the sort of some of the values and benefits that have come out of it. The second project is the Blavatnik School of Government, and I've circulated a few of the brochures in the curriculum. And that's a very new initiative. So the first students just came a few months ago. So the endowment was given about 2 years ago and set up, and Nairi is the dean of the school. And so the flagship program and where the effort is for now is a 1-year intensive Masters of Public Policy. And I'd just like to talk you through a few of the aims of the school and then focus a little bit on the curriculum. So the idea is it's very much a school of, for policy leaders. So for people who are going to do a master's and then go into, let me just read the mission statement. So the Blavatnik School of Government is a global school pursuing a vision of better government, stronger societies, and richer human opportunities across the world. We examine practices of government in all continents, recognizing that societies work in different ways but can learn from each other. And then there's a lot of emphasis on the practical skills, so both the academic foundation and the practical skills. And picking up on one of the things that were mentioned earlier, the idea of really training future leaders that can deal with complex problems. And the recognition that problems are not just economic, social, and political, which have been the traditional disciplines of a school of public policy, but also scientific and technological. So it's a multidisciplinary program, and it's focused for now on the provision of a master's. And just to give you a bit of an idea of the students, in the first cohort who are currently in Oxford, we have 38 students from 19 different countries. And one of the challenges has been to raise enough scholarships to make sure you've got a real diverse and sort of deeply diverse student group. So to speak a little bit about the curriculum, it's really looking for students who are going to go and serve a successful career in public service, and that's very broadly interpreted. So in government or non-governmental organizations, or indeed in the private sector, but the sort of ethos of public service. And then both the analytical skills and critical thinking to understand the challenges of government, how public policy is framed, implemented, and delivered, and then evaluation of performance and outcomes. And in terms of the actual delivery and method, some of it is the traditional lecture and teaching, but also a lot of practical skills workshops, intensive modules, and master's classes taught by practitioners who talk through an experience they've had. For example, one recent one on dealing with the financial crisis. And it's very much both individual and collaborative learning. And then the last bit of the overview I wanted to give you was just the disciplinary foundations, because I think they're quite interesting, and the core courses. So there's 4 core courses. The first draws on philosophy and history, and the idea is to equip students to resolve ethical dilemmas in public policy and to understand the historical trajectory of government in different parts of the world. So that's the first one. The second one is based around economics, and is to understand the economic drivers and pressures on government and how economists analyze public policy. The third is then science and medicine, to be informed and critical users of scientific and medical advice provided to government. And I thought it was interesting, this last presentation on vaccines, and the problem, a lot of the policymakers are then economists who don't understand. So to try and get people coming out of the school who really understand science and have a sense of what it is to deal with scientific evidence. And the fourth and final sort of core discipline is then around law, politics, and international relations, and that's to understand the practice and organization of government, both nationally and globally. So I can talk a little bit more about that in the question and answer, the discussion session. But before I came, I asked Nairi, there any sort of lessons about setting up a school and what she'd sort of suggest. And she said there are 3 things. One, and it resonates with several of the presentations that were given earlier, is to set the goal of the school in respect of the world and not the institution. So that sense of often things are driven by the existence of an institution. In Oxford, we've got a long history of that. So she said it's really keep the focus on what the world needs, not what your institution's pushing for, and then stick to them. So one is defining your goals, but also in doing that, defining what you're not doing as well, so to be quite focused. And then she said once you've got those overall goals, to set the benchmarks. So to really be very focused about exactly what you want to deliver in a short term, so how you're going to reach the goals, which is common sense, but she said it's easy to miss. So it's very easy to focus on the big picture, but then actually to say, what are the benchmarks by which we measure success? What does success look like? And then in delivering the curriculum, she said there's an interesting balance to be struck, which is that often curriculums are supply-driven. It depends on the faculty and who you can attract. But they also need to try, and that's great because you get the skills, you get the top people, and the very exciting academics. But also they need to work within and belong to a sort of the vision of the school and the goals of the school. So trying to shape the academic curriculum as well, and to work with the academics around that. And I think particularly for the interdisciplinary approach, because it means academics getting out of their traditional safe zones and collaborating across. So I think that's probably all I have to say.
Leonello.
Okay, thank you. Well, once again, we are tired, but without the bowl of spaghetti waiting for us. This, once again, to explain that I'll try to be brief. I mean, really what I will try to do is to outline a half-baked research project, which I've been thinking about. Then Peter was in Siena, Valeria was in Siena, then I talked to other people, and we hope that we get other people on board, especially on the spirit of multidisciplinarity, if not interdisciplinarity. And the story goes like this. I think, of course, given my background, I always begin with models, unfortunately for you. And this year I was teaching at PPED a course on growth theory from a global and local viewpoint. So I was trying to figure out from growth theory, in which I grew, when I was young, what could say about varieties of capitalism, for instance, local development, sustainability, and structural change, which was the singularity or the discontinuity. I was accusing Giovanni Dosi not to think about. I insist that I don't think he thinks seriously about this. At the end of this course, I realized the following thing, that the growth theory began really thinking about the factors of growth. We are not the factors of production. Because capital, if you remember Mr. Solos, capital stock in the long run does not determine economic performance. What determines economic performance in that kind of model, but that is an example, is something that looks more like a public good, freely accessible, manda kind of technological progress that changes productivity. Whoever has access to that can get the same performance as other people, as other countries. Now, for a long time, growth theory has been rethought, in the 80s in particular, trying to change one such a public good into a private good. Because neoclassical only think in terms of markets. So what do we do with this? Okay, it has to be a private good. How? Well, capital, human capital, R&D, and the whole theory of why people produce technological progress as an economic good. So in a sense, a public good has been transformed into a private good. But then more recently, and that was the end of my course, and suddenly one day I realized that if you look at local development, not starting from, now Lisa was there with me, not starting from growth theory, but from other approaches to local development, and of course being Italian, I'm thinking about industrial districts, for instance, you see that there was born a different idea, meaning that productivity is a system kind of result that is generated but non-appropriable or hard to appropriate resources. Why are they hard to appropriate or non-appropriable? Well, the first characteristic is that they come as a whole, as a bunch. Think, I'm listing 4 of them. Think about environment. Environment is made up of resources. If you think with a microscope. But what matters really is that everything is clean. Not only the air, not only the water, not only this and that. I mean, what really is relevant for the welfare and possibly the productivity is the quality of environment as such, as a whole. Think about, and as such, who can own the environment? Nobody. It's naturally a public good. Of course, environmental theory, environmental economics, which I think it is basically a neoclassical theory, has to transform the environment in something that they can handle. How? Put in the microscope and looking singly out each resource, and for each of them applies the same machinery. Okay? It doesn't look at the whole. But when you come to look at the local development, you cannot overlook the idea the quality of life depends on the environment as such. Second example, territory. That's a very much an Italian invention, I think. We insist very much on the territory as I call it a landscape or a canvas of various sorts of resources. And no, many of them are man-made, some are natural, but the two have to combine. They cannot come, Chianti Shire, as we call it, because of the density of English-speaking owners, is a piece of land where you have stones and vineyards. But stones and vineyards have to come together. Otherwise, you don't produce that wine. So territory, and why do you have vineyards? You think that we plant a vine and grows? No, we have first of all to prepare the soil. And preparing the soil has been the main effort for the last 2,000 years, since the Romans began tilling and planting vines in the Chianti Shire. So territory is once again a whole notion that is partly natural and partly cultural, reflects the history of the community, in that case the Italians living in the area, and reflects their habits and their material culture and their culture in the high sense of the word. And once again, you see, one can think in both in quality of life and productivity, they enter both of them. You know, the wine called Chianti is not a natural produce. It's a blend. It's a blend of 4 different kinds of grapes in variable but within an interval proportions, which has been evolved over the years, over the centuries, in fact. It is a cultural product. It is a natural cultural product, which is as good as it is because for 2,000 years people have been tilling, digging stones out of the soil. Third, again, you see, territory is quite clearly a commons. Why is it a commons? Because you can extract resources, you can extract an income from it, okay? And on the other hand, it has some almost defined property rights, not in the sense that somebody, well, you know, Chianti, you have 2 kinds of property rights in Chianti. You have the owner of the vineyard and the land, and then you have a stake on Chianti. So it's a kind of like having a so-called anti-commons, too many property rights defined on it. But let's stay with the commons story and insist on the idea that there are some natural stakeholders. Okay? So third, culture. Now, once again, what is culture? Culture is something that belongs to somebody. The culture, it doesn't exist in an abstract sense. Yeah? It belongs to something. So for the same argument, I can say that it is a kind of a common. Now, the last one is social relations. You know, there's a vast literature on the importance of social relations as a determinant or one of the factors of productivity of certain societies compared to other societies. This I remember, I was set on this track by Robert years ago when he told me that he began his career on Monte Amiata looking at a small community, and I kept thinking about that ever since. So this is the producer. Well, okay. So now, what do we do with these 4 or 5 items? The last one is particularly important with the resurgence of the importance of the cities and the other problems related with that. Okay, what I'm saying is that when you have this kind of public goods, they are local public goods, plus they are wholes, but they are factors of production. So you have to find systems of preserving them, valorizing them, and transforming them in returns. So these systems are neither the market nor the state. That was the point I was making this morning. These systems are governed by local communities, and the problem is to find suitable systems of governance that guarantee the community hold the power to run these places compatibly with a bigger scene. And so the problem is governance on one side and empowerment on the other side, an intermediate institution, what Mrs. Ostrom calls multicentricity. Well, of course, when you come to small communities, when you come to communities not necessarily small, the problem is naturally a sustainability problem. Now, in order to close, because Anna is launching spades against high spades against me. I only want to recall you a book by the past colleague of mine called Diamond, the Collapse. Okay? It's a wonderful book that tells you that when you come to local public goods like these ones, the problem is how to handle the whole of the island of Ista, not just the forest on the mountain that produced the timber to go out fishing. That's it. Thank you.
Silvana, and then Gary, okay? Silvana, please.
During the coffee break, I was talking to Cristina and Anna, and I was saying something that I'm now going to turn public. I am very attracted to the idea that an interesting thing for the school to do is to surf. And but I think that this merits to be discussed a little bit more, which in the sense that in the surf, in order to surf, we use a board, right, a surfing board, and I suppose that this surfing board is made of some old material as well. So I think that a way of combining traditions, experiences that we have in this field of experimenting, exchanging between different fields of knowledge and among different institutions have to be recovered, as well as we have to have the audacity of setting a percentage of what we are doing, of our activities, or even our budget, as it was suggested, for some very challenging themes, even and research and thinking, because we talk very easily, I think. Well, for those whom I am meeting for the first time, I should say that I worked for 2 decades in the first interdisciplinary program, graduate program in Brazil. It was the first one. We took this turn in '76, and it was not easy. It was very difficult. We faced all these problems of where is it that our students are going to find jobs or even activity, because they were kind of monsters, right? They are not economists, they were not anthropologists, they were not philosophers, nor were they economists. And we too, we were not either. We all suffered of this interdisciplinary identity crisis, right? Peter was our colleague, and Celia came in '79, from Chile and all that, Campinas. But anyway, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because we always realized that it was difficult, but nevertheless, we were trying to do interdisciplinarity among social sciences. Another thing is to do interdisciplinary with, to practice some initiative in this field, and gathering medical doctors, physicists, mathematicians, or other engineers. It's to really cross disciplines or fields, I would say. And well, this was also already discussed. But now what I found interesting here is that, at least I understood in our debate, that it's another boundary to cross, the boundary of fiction. That's why I am defending that we should dedicate some time to this very audacious idea. And it is not science fiction, maybe, because some things are already happening in the field, especially in the field of medicine. As I think Liliana is studying this empirically. So is Christina and many others. And at the same time I do this, I am also inclined to think that I want to clarify that I'm not a person who can be defined by being in love with everything that's new. I really like the tradition that we have built because we are products of our history. When I was listening to Professor Bevilacqua today, and I could remember each and every one of the pages of our great pedagogue, the pedagogy of the oppressed, where these boundaries between learning and teaching, the point of departure being the reality, and this is also present in Emily's first suggestion. Now look at the reality, depart from reality, depart from problems. This is far, far, very far from any kind of empiricism. It's the problematization that matters. So I'm very fond of this combination, and this is probably is not at stake here. But I just would like to say that probably we should add to this some bit of audacity and to create problems. To create problems.
Excellent. Edmar. Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Institute of Economics.
Thank you.
Director of Research.
So what I can share with you is my recent experience as research director of the institute, and also my experience as the coordinator of energy research group also in the Institute of Economics. I think that there is a big challenge for any new school, but which is the challenge of the Brazilian university in general, mainly the federal or public universities in Brazil, which is how to bring, how to make possible the innovation that you have in the name of the school. Because in the end of the day, innovation needs companies, enterprises. Innovation is something that reaches the market through the participants of the market. So we need to find a way to transfer the knowledge that we generate to the companies that will transform that into innovation. Brazil has a strong difficulty to make this possible because our universities, mainly the graduate schools at our universities, has been made with the idea that we need to form the infrastructure that we need to form people for the universities. And also, we need to form people, qualified people, that will go to the companies and also to the governments. So the idea is a supply-oriented strategy to form qualified people and to form and to create knowledge. But when it comes to create innovation in a modern way, collaboration between university and companies, we have a big trouble doing that because there is a whole bunch of problems that starts with our own culture at the university. We have trouble to collaborate with companies. We don't think about that very much. We are at the university and we wait the companies to search for us. In general, companies in Brazil, for example, public companies, they sometimes think at the universities as their partners. Private companies, they hardly do that. Some strategic companies do that, but normally private companies in Brazil don't even think that we can collaborate with them. and we don't think about them neither. So we have a vicious cycle there to break. But also, when you want to collaborate with private companies, in Brazil, federal public companies find a lot of regulations that make that very hard, almost impossible right now. And we are, at this moment, passing through a time of re-regulation, or the government is trying to make some discipline on how the gestion of universities is done in Brazil, and that will make it even harder to foster this collaboration. So I think that we have here at the school 2 challenges. One is to think how the school itself can collaborate with private companies and to make this dimension of innovation to happen. So I think that it's not possible to make innovation only an idea that stays at the university is not an innovation. It's a good idea that stays at the university. Sometimes it can become an innovation, but how to bring this to the companies. So this is one challenge. Another challenge is because we have also policies and development. So how to so there is a good work to do is how we can study the Brazilian relationship, the cooperation in Brazilian case between public companies or public university and the companies, how to improve that, how to change the policies to make that innovation more feasible in Brazil. I think that there is a lot of diagnosis, studies that have been done, mainly with people who deal with science and technology, Ministry of Science and Technology in Brazil. But I'm sure that in the Ministry of Education in Brazil, they don't know these studies. So we can feed this debate through the school. So I think that could be a good start, one of the themes that you can embrace and to go ahead with this school, Spiderweb. Thank you.
Diana.
Thank you, Anne. I thought you hadn't heard me. No, I just wanted to start with this idea that Francisco mentioned of how many new things there are going on, because I'm looking at one, which is stem cell research, and when you get into that world, it's like a new world in some way because of all that is going on, which is partly regulated and partly unregulated, not only here, I mean internationally wise. So it's a real challenge, I think, for us in Latin America, because in many countries still, maybe in Brazil not so much, but there's still in policy making an old kind of thought where these new developments are not considered seriously, and they are going to set the pace for the whole innovation system in some way, especially, for example, within health, but also within agriculture, etc. And I think there's not enough room given to that in the thought. And this morning, when Marianne was talking about radical, I think the importance of putting a lot of emphasis on the study of radical innovation within this for our kinds of countries, because if we are away from the frontier of thought, then we won't have the competitiveness needed, but we won't be able to have a fair play in the new accumulation model that Benjamin, for example, is talking about. So we're going to get into the new phase in starting from a new kind of divide, or international division of labor, in a way that is not sufficiently good for emerging countries. And I think Brazil has a lot to offer in this sense, because for example, in the case of, Cristina Posas said about vaccines, or in the case of stem cells, there is radical innovation going on. And then you can't consider only the role of the state as a buyer, although it is important in the sense that it promotes incremental innovations, but mainly incremental innovations. But you have to set aside an important amount of thought and money and policy towards radical innovations. And I think we should, in the school, part of the work could be done on that aspect. Like some of the people are doing, we could combine this and combine what people are doing and set out different radical innovations which are in the vision of the future, even useful to get out from the crisis of this model of accumulation. Because if you think in long-term cycles, then you think that in this new phase you might need to put a lot of emphasis on technologies like biotechnology, or it's happening already, and that this might bring in a new phase of a new cycle, a new phase of capitalism as a whole. This is one point. And the other point is, there's only two. So the other point is that I'm very much into what Benjamin Correa was saying about not being too, in our projects in the future, the joint projects we do, not to stay only at the national state level, because in terms of international, the impact of international regulation in a globalized world is so strong that there are many other new actors that we have to bring forward at the international level and at the community level, like Lionel was saying. And of course, the organizations of civil society that in general, I feel that in the last day's discussion were a bit, in my opinion, left aside. You know, the importance of other kinds of organizations that have a say in policy and have a say in innovation. And then the other point is like a more moral or ethical issue, which is in the case of health, but also in the case of environment, etc., bring in the ethical issue of the tensions involved between a public good like health and international competitiveness in that public good. I think we have to bring in the ethical issues related to that, especially when we're talking of development in our projects. So I would suggest, for example, that part of the work that can be done, Anna, could be, I think, could be to do, like some colleagues suggest, sectoral studies, following up a certain technology in the present circumstances within the whole context of the alternative views of capitalism and varieties of capitalism, but or set policies and follow them up and become quite empirical with a framework that we can compare between countries, because we need to integrate the framework a little bit more. I think we are just starting in some way to integrate different views on the framework. Thank you.
Sebastian.
Thank you. A couple of words about an interesting project, and also consider this as an invitation to cooperate. I'm coordinator of the Global Studies, a European Perspective program at the University of Wrocław, and this is a part of a bigger European consortium led by the University of Leipzig, and also with partners like London School of Economics, University of Roskilde, and University of Vienna. And this is not just a cooperation, this is a marriage, and quite difficult marriage, because we offer a joint master program. So at the end we issue a double degree or a joint degree, and the whole project is financed also, or co-financed by the Erasmus Mundus program. And apart from that, 6 universities in the world cooperate closely with us, so our students spend there at least usually one semester. This is Santa Barbara, University of California, Halifax in Canada, Dalhousie, Stellenbosch in South Africa, Fudan in Shanghai, JNU in New Delhi, and Macquarie in Australia. So our students should study globalization, but they get really a very broad picture of this globalization. They are confronted with different cultures, for example, Polish university culture, LSE culture, and also one of the non-European universities. And when I heard the presentations in the first part, of course, some problems, some topics resembled our challenges, because what is global studies? Yeah? So these are. This is actually an approach to analyze globalization, and one of the most important assumptions is that states are not the only visible actors in globalization, and we should move away a little bit from the international relations area and study different actors' perspective. Of course, we decided to give up the Eurocentric perspective. This was clear, and also this is probably the biggest challenge, to how to combine different disciplines in this approach. This is still a challenge, and I think we probably stopped a little bit in the middle of the way, because we have strong historian representatives in the consortium, but also a global political economy, for example, Roskilde and Wrocław. And apart from that, you can imagine that it was a huge organizational challenge. 2005, when we started. I had some doubts, of course, if to start this project, because it looked like a mother of all bureaucratic battles. Yeah? But my colleague asked me ironically, "Do you know why the Serbian army during the NATO intervention was able to shut down the invisible F-16 aircraft?" Because they didn't know that it was invisible. Yeah? So just go on, yeah. You'll see then what is the problem, and you will solve the problem. This was actually a good approach, because now the consortium is really like a family, sophisticated family, but quite efficient family. It's a social science project, but surviving in international competition. And as you probably marked, there is no South American university in this consortium. Yeah? This is why I also started some cooperation with Renato, and Renato visited Poland last November, and he offered a workshop, 15 hours workshop on the Brazilian capitalism. This was a very successful initiative. But we are open, of course, to cooperate in the fields of varieties of capitalism, global economic governance, international cooperation, also security issues, because the global studies is a very broad, still very broad bunch of topics. Although I think it will slowly move to this kind of complexity science, but. We are still quite away from that. But, well, I think such international projects have great chances to be successful. This is the future. Thank you.
Paulo, and then Robert. Paulo.
I have...
from...
São Paulo School of Economics, Fundação Getúlio Vargas. And I have a brief comment, which is somewhere in the middle of Silvana's presentation, also Luis Bevilacqua's presentation from one side, and the other side, Barry's presentation. I will start with a quick statement, and then I will provide two examples. One of failure, and the other, I think, of success. Maybe those examples can inform us a little bit about what we can do in order to build a School of Advanced Studies. Well, first, it's, of course, an excellent idea and a needed initiative. And the reason is we don't have many of those schools with this capability of providing knowledge and human resources for delivering public policy. We don't have many. Actually, we barely have few. And why? Perhaps it's too difficult. And what are the features that I think that this type of school must have? Must provide something new, a new answer, a new solution for the problem. And also, it must be interdisciplinary, because we deal with policies. We must have a combination of knowledges, so we must have something interdisciplinary. And I think conventional schools, like mine, face difficult constraints. in order to provide this experience. For example, we are not built to be multidisciplinary. Actually, we are built in compartments, departments to be precise. Also, if you are in the frontier of department, and why you are in a frontier? Because you are exploring the interface with the other departments. Normally, you are not so well represented in the decisions of your department. Normally, the decision of your department is the median preference and not the border preference. And this relates with hiring professors and all the decisions relevant to our daily work. And also the external evaluation reinforces the current paradigm. And this also happens with when we try to publish in peer-reviewed journals. Of course, we are evaluated by our peers, and this has a mechanism of reinforcement that exacerbates path dependence. And if we want something really new, we have to break this inertia. And I will provide two examples. One is my school, and the other is a network that we have. Actually, Anna is also a participant. My school was born with the aim, exactly the aim to provide public policy, in particular public policy for the development of Brazil. And our dean had money, power, and energy. And he started to doing exactly this. But a couple of years later, he started to be pressured to provide external evaluation that was compatible with the amount he was spending and the perspective of all the supporters of our project. And then he had to, perhaps not had to, but it was his option to, let's say, correct his path. And then we started to hire professors, excellent professors, the most productive professors, but regardless the questions they were researching. For example, just to give an example, we just hired perhaps one of the best mathematicians in economics in Brazil, very productive. And I must say, a very nice guy as well. But it's difficult to see any spillover of his presence in the role of a school to provide knowledge and human resources for public policy. So is it a case of failure? Well, actually, we had now perhaps one of the best production levels in Brazil. In terms of the Brazilian ranking, we are the most productive department. But it is a failure. We've taken into account the mission. It's a written mission of our organization to provide public policy for the development of Brazil. So this is what I think is the failure, the example of a failure, and reveals the constraints that we face. What I think it's a good case of success, it's a network that we have based mainly in friendship and the willing to cooperate. It started like this, 3 professors of 3 different universities, my university, University of São Paulo, and INSPER in São Paulo. And we met and, well, why don't we start to meet regularly? And well, why? Because we want to have this benefit of aggregating knowledge, to increase the scale. As we are in the border of our departments, we want company. We want to have a scale of interaction. And also, it's very important because we want to see each other because we like each other. So this is important. It's not a formal organization. It's mainly a network of relationship based in exchange of knowledge, the intent to exchange knowledge, but also in friendship. And this started to evolve, and now we have an international network with researchers in the US, in France, and Denmark, and several states of Brazil. Everybody is invited to join our network, of course. But I think it's a major conclusion.
Institutions and organizations, the name of our...
Yeah, the name of the, it's CORS, course. This is a new name, actually, we started using. We didn't have a name for ourselves in the beginning.
No, but it was institutions and organizations.
Yeah, the subject, we had a workshop, research workshop in institutions and organization. And now we have even a website. No? And everybody's invited to look at it. It's cors.usp.br. It's located in USP, but it's not USP. It's interesting because as we are this network of personal relationships, we were able to resist adverse shocks several times. For example, lack of funds. Well, no problem. We had our workshop with lack of funds. Everybody working a little bit harder. Well, so this is my point. It's difficult to do in the conventional organization of a university, a department. And it's easier to do in a network of relationship of persons.
Robert, please. I continue the list, huh? I have several others here, but you will speak in a minute, okay? In minutes.
My first point actually relates to comments of Emily, Paolo, and Barry, and it has to do with a central problem in institutionalizing a set of people who are whose mission is to teach public service or public policy. Let me illustrate the problem with reference to the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton, where I taught. The central problem is whether the body of people who are meant to deliver the mission have appointments which are solely made by that body, or whether their appointments are made in departments and then they are sort of approved for appointment in the School of Interdisciplinary Studies or the School of Public Service, or whatever it's called. In the Woodrow Wilson School, everybody whose mission is very much to teach public service, to teach how to formulate, deliver public policy, but everybody, almost everybody there, has to have an appointment in a department of economics or political science or sociology, whatever it may be. And the result is that although the mission of the school is to teach public service, public policy, most of the staff who see themselves as oriented to a discipline do not want to do that. And so there has been a chronic tension, so much so that for quite a few years, the Woodrow Wilson School has been embroiled in a big legal case brought by the Robinson family, which is one of the big donors to the Wilson School, and by Paul Volcker. Paul Volcker, the former chair of the Fed, who is a Princeton graduate, and who wrote in about 1995 a pamphlet called The Quiet Crisis. The Quiet Crisis was the failure of schools like the Woodrow Wilson School, the Kennedy School, and all the other schools in the United States which were meant to be delivering this public service kind of education, the failure to actually do it. And so Paul Volcker and the Robinson family teamed up to bring the Woodrow Wilson School itself to court, to get it, to force it to teach courses relevant for the delivery of public services. And it put the dean of the school in a position of sort of structural conflict with the rest of the faculty because the dean represented the mission of the school and the faculty wouldn't do it. So this is quite a big problem. The second point, and somehow or other this just has to be resolved. It's a very big, just let me repeat the main point. It's a very big issue whether the appointments to the body that's meant to be delivering this kind of education are first of all made in departments or whether the body itself can make its own appointments. And secondly, since I'm from LSE, I can't resist mentioning this problem of donor money. There was a huge sigh of relief in Oxford when Tony Blair cancelled the Serious Fraud Office's investigation of the relationships between BAE Systems, which is the biggest UK defense firm, and Saudi Arabia. The reason is that if that investigation had gone ahead, then the funding of the Said Business School in Oxford would have been shown to be a real can of worms because it was corrupt. There was no question. But Tony Blair fortunately cancelled the investigation, so this never came up. I gather that the authorities at Oxford spent a great deal of time investigating how this man, Blavotnik, whose name is on your school, how he got his money, and whether, if it was subject to any court case, he would be found to have been corrupt or not. So anyway, the point is, and of course, LSE has got into a great deal of trouble because it got into bed with Gaddafi in Libya, and all kinds of nasty things came out. That's a long story if you want to hear me tell it over dinner. So anyway, that's a series of issues. Point number 2 is that my inference from the discussion of the past 2 days, my inference is that a sort of central mission of whatever this enterprise is, the mission is sort of motivated by an undercurrent of worry about Brazil's industrial competitiveness. Looking ahead, there's all the talk about innovations of one kind or another, getting universities more connected with companies, and so on and so on. The theme of that is worry about Brazil kind of falling behind or becoming more specialized as a commodity producer. And I want to suggest a mechanism which this enterprise might consider, which has been very much developed, institutionalized, utilized in East Asia. And that is East Asia, by which I mean Taiwan and Korea especially, put a great deal of effort into organizing the diaspora, that is the intellectual diaspora, that is to contact, in this case it would be contact Brazilians, in many other countries, perhaps, who knows, working for IBM, working for whatever companies you like to think, but working abroad, and institutionalizing a regular mechanism for bringing them back for a week or 2 weeks, bringing them back perhaps for longer periods with some degree of public subsidy, so that they look forward to these events. What happened in East Asia was that networks began to be formed, and starting from the 1970s, when they really made a big push on this organizing of the diaspora, it had a fundamental change. It made a fundamental change in their perception. They previously talked of a big problem of a brain drain. All these nationals were going overseas to be educated, and they were not coming back. But once they began to think of organizing the diaspora, the brain drain became the brain bank, the brain bank. So they looked upon their nationals in IBM or wherever as a resource that could be utilized if they at home took the initiative to do so. And so that it would seem to me that one thing to bear in mind is for this project is developing a database of Brazilians operating elsewhere in interesting positions for companies here and bringing them in one way or another, either inducing them to come back or inducing them to stay there, but to cooperate with people and companies here. So that's the second main point. The third point comes out of what Deborah Fogel said, because it seems to me that her experience, it was a fascinating account of this project that she helped to organize, but the really depressing thing was that it was a one-off. Why? Because her successor decided that it was too time-intensive, too resource-intensive, so he or she had other priorities. So the lesson to be drawn from that is that if you want this project to continue, you have to have some full-time staff who have a budget that's dedicated for this. Because if it's left just to people to do part-time, then the initiative is going to go. Because I know very well how intensive it was for you to pull this whole thing together. So my basic point is that although there's a tendency, understandable tendency, for us to want a kind of a blueprint, what should we do? Should we deal with this? Should we deal with that? And so on and so on. In practice, the really important thing is to make sure that there is a budget for a certain number of staff, and then you can follow your nose, so to speak. You can go at it case by case, and it will just kind of grow, at least for the first several years. So, first of all, get a budget. That's the bottom line.
It's not a problem. The budget is guaranteed because this is a program. This is a official program from CAPES. So the school was already approved.
For how long?
How long? For how many times we want to do it? Because it's a permanent resource.
For how many staff? The point is, you have done this very substantially by yourself, as I understand it.
Yes.
So you
yes,
need some
true.
staff.
Yeah. But you can do it. This is a point. Yes, I have to think about this. This is a good point.
Very important.
Yeah, Gary. Yes.
It's been really an amazing day listening to the different visions that are out there, and I wanted to just add some kind of pragmatic points, and these are really for you mostly, Anna. Okay, it breaks. I think that there are some simple things to be sorted out here. One thing is, I think the spider web is one thing and the spider is another. All right, the spider web is the basis of collaborative research projects that can be coordinated around the world with this wonderful network of people that essentially you've brought together over the years. You and Silvana and the others who built this. This is something fantastic and unique. This conversation between Keynesians, Schumpeterians, semi-Schumpeterians, et cetera, is remarkable and I think unique. And I think that in an era where a lot of these bankrupt pain-in-the-ass funders are asking for multinational links, multidisciplinary links, this makes a real resource for people to tap into. And so again, now Robert, has just mentioned about some of the things that are necessary, but one of these would be, kind of following you, a listserv, a website, different mechanisms so people can tap. Now, that's energy that you don't have to carry yourself if you have a webmaster or just somebody who says, or if there's a trust basis so people can even pass ideas around this network, that'll go really well. I'm thinking of where you're at in terms of that research is something that, as I enter the University of Leeds, and so now I'm a leadership chair and all this, and I've got this magic wand to do some things for a while. And one of the things that we've got economists scattered all over our campus, they're mostly applied. So we have this new center we're building, and it goes, I'm finding earth environment engineers, health people, transportation people, geographers, and so on. We're scattered all over the place. I'm in a business school, and there's just a lot of interest in collaboration precisely along the lines that we're talking about. And you know, when we hear the discussion about, for example, the need for people involved in public health to be able to have things to say to counter and to work with economists, that's one thing. And when we hear that that's part of the design of the Oxford School, you know, you said very innocently the way that economists evaluate public policy. Well, I'll tell you the way that most economists evaluate public policy. Go to his department, find out who's teaching public economics, and if it's not him, and if it's one of those conventional people, you see how useful that is to her. And the answer is it's not, and I'm sure that Nagari is going to get somebody who's able to work with those people who are more experienced to bring him in to make a difference. That's going to happen, right? So this is something that's built in, and the energy of the network will carry it. Now, second part, onto the school. Spider's your school. And as you were appreciated, it was very nice to, I liked your description. I heard Barry, and I could tell you my own stories about the U.S., but I was thinking of a phrase that Jeff Harcourt left us, or leaves us. He always likes to say, horses for courses. Now, he's mostly talking about economics, you know, use different kinds of models for different kinds of problems. But I think the same thing is true for actual courses, like this, the course that you're inventing here, the course at Oxford, the others. Oxford can play a game that's a game that says, we're dealing with world leaders, we're going to go and we're going to find some folks in the global south to step up, we're going to build a network, and some of those people are going to be presidents of their country and finance ministers, and that's going to be true. There's other people that can build other kinds of programs. Field Cruz is building, you know, looking at building a program where they've got people who are going to take the Brazilian health system into the next generation. And so, you know, like different things for different people. One of the challenges that you know, Barry's program faced is this question of what are we feeding exactly? And I think one advantage that, you know, one disadvantage there is that the U.S. academic market is vast, and getting a label is really difficult, as Robert described with the Woodrow Wilson experience. One thing that's a real advantage here in Brazil is that there are not that many programs like yourself. And so you've got this uniqueness there, you know, so that you, this ability to kind of have a program that's very responsive to the particular needs, and part of it too is that, you know, you've got, there's reputation, the people that have been involved have some experience, and they're going to be looking to make interesting career choices. The public sector here is a much more important demander of the highly trained labor that the public universities can provide. This is a model for the world, and this program has the potential to take these amazingly complex problems. How do we deal with patent policy, public health needs, redistribution, as you pointed out in your wonderful dialogue? You know, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with advancing the economies of the informal, you know, of the favelas in Brazilian cities in a context of a changing model, as Francisco was pointing out? These are the things that are, you know, sort of the challenges that you can take on and deal with. And my sense is that the cohorts will be fairly small, and they can find their places. I think in terms of the school going global, and what my one suggestion would be that you might even theme different years. There might be like a health year, and then like an urban year, or then, you know, like different kinds of foci, just so you have, if it's a really small program, people kind of synergizing with each other in ways. The school going global, a couple of things. We had a lot of early contributions to this conversation, which has been a really long but productive one, where people were talking about the excitement of postdoctoral fellows and young scholars getting together and having opportunities to exchange in kind of, and that's so important. I think that this school could perhaps sponsor some of that activity and would really be valuable, especially for the young scholars that you're talking about, who maybe, you know, who need help finding each other, so they can then build alliances to reproduce as anomalies within a system that still drives us toward disciplines. And so, that will be something there. As far as the going across borders, I think it's, there are some experiments, as Sebastian was saying, about some of the European experiments and some others that can be used, and even student exchanges that we're, as you know, we're hoping to build with at Leeds, with you at UFRJ and a couple of the other Brazilian universities. I think some of these experiments of exchanging students and then sort of watching these multi-institution programs such as we were hearing from Sebastian grow, and paying attention to how those work are, can be kind of a way forward. So my thought would be, run with the program you got, watch the other experiments go, maybe see if there's opportunities to do something special with postdocs and people who would be parts of that interdisciplinary world that's emerging, and kind of, take it from there. In building my center at Leeds, one thing I've been told is that, and you all know, and Robert hit it on the head, my school is really based on what revenue are you bringing into your school, and is that justifying your budget? And so I am part of this interdisciplinary wave that's coming into the University of Leeds. And basically, as a surfer, if we look very carefully at that picture, the trick, right, is to ride on the wave, but not to get in front of it so much that you lose momentum or you get taken over. And I think all of these interdisciplinary experiments, we got to be aware about that. Ride with it. And in some sense, the expansion, people will want to expand, but make sure you've got capacity, because there's only one Ana Celia Castro. And if there's one entrepreneur in this world, it would be she.
Thanks. Now I have Joana, Antônio Carlos, Alexandre, yes, and Kaido. Okay, and we are almost 20 minutes. So really very brief comments. I'm so sorry, but I think we can continue. Yeah, but then please, Joana.
I will be very fast. It's actually difficult to add something useful to the discussion at this point right now. I'll just try to summarize some of my thoughts. So there were two different things that were discussed. One of them was format, the other was content, right? So regarding the format, I really liked Deborah's experience in the Biochemistry Society. I had a similar experience during my PhD, and I think one of the tricks is to go somewhere where there's no distraction. I had that experience in Vienna at the Max Planck. If you've ever been there, you know there's nothing else to do but talk about research. And I think that really makes it useful. Now, in terms of content, I was amazed by Francisco's suggestion of going a bit crazy and have topics that are a bit beyond our current concepts of reality. It made me think of projects that are being developed now in aeronautics, for example, where they address what should be the airplane of the future, and I think that's exactly what we need to do with research. But I would only add to that to do that, I think we really need interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary contributions. I myself am a chemist, so and I really think that's the only way to address, a bit in the lines of what Luis, I was really enjoyed your story, and thought that if I had the opportunity to study like that, I would have certainly chose it. And then we got back to Barry, who gave us the more realistic view of the market, which brought us back a bit to reality. But I think that in the world we need dreamers and realists, and I think we have a bit of both here. Now, just to finish, and as a young postdoc researcher, I think that it's very interesting to create an environment, a closed environment to discuss research with other young scholars. So thank you.
Antônio Carlos.
Thank
from
you.
Campinas, Unicamp.
Unicamp. Well, I was listening to Deborah's and Bevilacqua's presentations, which were very inspiring. I found myself thinking once more, oh, what a bliss to be a hard scientist. What a bliss to be an engineer, because then you know where the frontier is. And I suppose, maybe naively, that for each particular field inside a discipline, you can locate precisely where the frontier is. And this is not the case with economics in particular, with social sciences in general, because we have so many different debatable frontiers that we can even think of parallel universes that sometimes do not talk to each other and sometimes collide. And this is true even for unorthodox economists who have been defining themselves for not being orthodox, but not for having actually many things in common. Now, bringing back now something that Dozy said, we need to overcome this situation, and I think that we are in the way of doing that. I think that I really believe, I'm pretty optimistic that there's ground for some convergence nowadays for between heterodox economists. Now, we must have some convergence so as to deliver adequately what we mean to deliver in this school. And I think that an important contribution of this school is to improve this dialogue between different strands inside the heterodox thought. So I think that one of our tasks is to make room for some dialogue between ourselves. And not only, and this is a very challenging and daring endeavor, because this is not only about economists talking to each other, but this is about economists talking as well to political scientists and to other professionals. So it's really challenging. So this should be one of the tasks. We should make room for that. As well, of course, I think we should have courses. We still have some things to teach. So it's important to, yeah, okay. But not only courses. I mean, it's very important, and here I fully agree with what many of the speakers said, to make room for students to and to other professionals, to civil servants, to present to each other and to the organizers, professors, whatever, how are they called, of the course, their problems, and to have really a problem-solving activity. So I think that we should have these three kinds of activities. And finally, this is the question, Anna Sally. I'm not completely clear about our public. Do we intend to, not only profession-wise, but do we intend to concentrate on Brazilian students, or do we want to invite students from whatever? Okay, that's it.
Very good. Alexandre from IPEA.
So, I will speak em português. Eu vou contar uma experiência, aliás, são dois grandes projetos que a gente está envolvido no IPEA, né? Um envolve a Ana Célia, o Renato Boschi, algumas pessoas que estão aqui. E um outro projeto, esse a gente já está começando, né? E tem um outro projeto que a gente está concluindo. Eu vou contar um pouco os aprendizados, alguns pontos que eu acho importante nessa questão da pesquisa colaborativa e interdisciplinar, né? Algumas questões. Primeiro que as pessoas não são interdisciplinares, né? Mas os problemas são. Então, para fazer uma pesquisa colaborativa, primeiro exige um grande esforço, né, que não é trivial, de você definir o problema, né, ter um problema bem claro do que você quer analisar, definir as dimensões analíticas, né, porque é nessas dimensões analíticas que a interdisciplinaridade ela entra e se complementa, e a questão do nível de abstração que você vai trabalhar o seu problema. Então, esses são elementos importantíssimos para se trabalhar pesquisa colaborativa e interdisciplinar. além do grande esforço de coordenação e de montagem, né, do problema, envolve também uma grande disponibilidade das pessoas que estão trabalhando, né, apesar delas não serem interdisciplinares, mas de aprender com os outros profissionais. E isso também não é trivial, porque às vezes as pessoas são formadas em determinada, né, escola, em determinado nível de pensamento, que é difícil ela se abrir para que uma outra abordagem está falando que pode ser diferente, que ela pensa que pode ser contraposta, mas na verdade é muito complementar. Então, o perfil das pessoas para trabalhar em experiências desse jeito, desse tipo, é muito importante. E, por fim, o desapego que cada membro de uma equipe ele tem que ter, porque a tradição da academia, né, principalmente a academia brasileira, cada pesquisador ter sua agenda de pesquisa e a sua pegada, a sua abordagem em trabalhar. E quando você faz uma pesquisa interdisciplinar, em equipe, de certa maneira você vai estar desapegando da sua trajetória, de alguma maneira. Né? Porque, até eu brinco com o pessoal, a gente quer fazer uma pesquisa interdisciplinar, né, colaborativa, e não um livro, né, que vai ser grampear um montão de capítulos, né, que falam de coisas diferentes. Então, nisso, envolve, como eu disse, a questão da coordenação e da disponibilidade das pessoas. Então, eu vou contar rapidamente como que foi uma pesquisa, essa que a gente está terminando lá no IPEA. O grande problema era o que seria esse Estado desenvolvimentista democrático, o que seria fazer política desenvolvimentista em um país democrático. Então, junto com a equipe, né, nós definimos que o nosso nível de abordagem não ia ser nas metas narrativas, mas a gente ia trabalhar casos e políticas específicas e a implementação de políticas específicas. Então, nós fizemos todo um esforço em definir as dimensões que nós íamos analisar, né, e definir as políticas. Então, no caso, a gente definiu uma série de políticas industriais, de inovação, política social, política de infraestrutura. E para cada uma dessas políticas, a gente trabalhou com a abordagem, como era uma abordagem institucional, como que a gente ia analisar as instituições que permeavam essas políticas. Então, a gente definiu o que seria o arranjo institucional. O arranjo institucional montado em cada uma dessas políticas, né, que dependia do grande ambiente institucional do Brasil democrático. Né, a questão da sociedade civil, a questão da federação, o nosso regime político, etc. E aí nós escolhemos cientistas políticos, profissionais da área do direito, economistas e sociólogos. Então, a dimensão legal de implementar as políticas públicas. Aí trabalhamos com o pessoal da área do direito. Né, a questão do regime político e a relação Estado e sociedade, né, pessoas da ciência política, os instrumentos de incentivos econômicos, etc., os economistas. E em cima de um grande framework, né, desse quadro analítico, né, cada um deles trabalhou uma política, uma dimensão. Então, a gente foi capaz de construir uma matriz onde as diferentes dimensões se complementavam em cima de um mesmo problema. Né? Então, essa foi a chave que a gente encontrou. Eu acredito que a gente está tendo um grande sucesso porque os casos, os relatórios estão chegando, né, e a compilação disso tudo para a gente fazer um trabalho, né, e tirar alguns achados, né, até o momento está sendo bem exitoso nesse sentido. Né? Mas, enfim, né, essa é um pouco a experiência que eu queria colocar e desse perfil. Né? Quer dizer, a coordenação não é trivial, né, a questão do desapego e do perfil das pessoas. Agora, eu não sei se isso só foi possível a gente estar fazendo, porque como eu trabalho no Centro de Políticas Públicas, que é o IPEA, né, uma organização pública, eu não dependo de publicação, né, para eu ganhar o meu salário. Eu não dependo de publicar em revistas A, B, C, etc. E outra, eu não dependo que esse trabalho, né, seja aceito por algum journal, né, que é um pouco o que o Paulo Furquim colocou, né? Geralmente eu tenho que apresentar isso para um jornal de economia, de ciências políticas, etc., e acaba que nenhum desses journals vão aceitar esse paper, porque ele vai virar uma salada. Mas, enfim, tem um pouco essas questões das condições institucionais de você produzir e apresentar pesquisas desse tipo.
Ok, yes. Three, 4 minutes, yes. See. We have only 4 minutes, okay? You can also finish tomorrow, okay? Because we do
That's
have
right.
another session
Yes.
tomorrow morning.
Yes. Only 4 minutes. I promise. Well, the first point I told you in the 60, the Economics Institute, with the leading of Octavio Rodriguez, began to discuss about development in Uruguay. Octavio Rodriguez. The second point, you must know that the principal of my university is a mathematician, but he has a PhD in development study. He did it in 1990. This is important. In 2003, several deans support the creation of working area of development in my university. And in 2006, several faculties in my university create the degree in development. Several faculties: social science, chemistry, engineering, economic science, and architecture. 3 points. In 2009, we create the Social Science College. In the Social Science College, we create a degree of development. The first generation who are getting the degree came in the middle of 2013. In the political science department, in particular, the professor of the area of the state and public policies teach several subjects in this degree. The area of the state and public policies, there are 10 people who have PhDs. 4, masters and doctors. We have a doctor in PhDs in social science. Renato Boschki worked there the last year. In the middle of March, my university is organizing, with the support of CEPAL, Economic Commission for Latin America, a meeting of grid of networks in development. We are thinking that perhaps we can create some regional master in development. 4, two examples of training. We have a program of training in state and public policies with local governments, for example, Canelones, Maldonado. And another example, we have a master for high-level public administration. We have done 2 editions with our National Civil Servant Office. And what about postdoc? The School for Advanced Studies can generate synergies between the following open options. Immediately, we are concerned that our professor, 30, we have 30 only in the degree of in development, came to take courses at the school, this school. And in the future, we are seeking to create perhaps a regional development master degree. You have an invitation to come to Montevideo. And finally, we have professor able to offer different courses in this school. Well, I'm going to skip this slide. I just present some of this research in which we are working currently now. There is different lines of research. Some lines is more some lines more interdisciplinary, and others there aren't interdisciplinary. Reappraisal of macro theories is explaining Latin American development is a line of economic history, a terrible title. Economic History of Latin America, 2 centuries of instability and inequality. Terrible title. In the University of Columbia, directed by Joseph Stiglitz. Another about energy, innovation, and development. I think that is an issue very important and very interdisciplinary. Works political scientists, economists, heterodox. Engineering has a group very important, a very important line that is very interdisciplinary studies. Here are engineers, political scientists, sociologists. Research, innovation, and social inclusion, a study of the link between research and the innovation and self-sustainable human development process in high unequal societies. There is some lines in my department, political science, theory of the power and theory of the states. State reforms focus on the construction of the development agenda in Latin America. Varieties of capitalism and social policies, education, housing, social security. And now actually we have a line about we are studying state capacities. It's only this. Thank you very much.
Bert Keidel, you are the last one. And then I come with...
Thank you. I'm following up quickly on a number of ideas about how to find jobs for those that are graduating from the program that will actually advance our interests, which is to introduce particular policy perspectives into government decision making. And so the graduates will need certain skills. And this, I had decided on this comment before I heard Robert Wade come in. My undergraduate experience at Princeton's Woodrow Wilson School of International Affairs, it's a graduate school and a master's program, but they have a small number of undergraduates who study there, and it has a particular focus on policy making, particularly an interdepartmental, which in the United States is interministerial. And so the undergraduates in their last year work in a group which in China you'd call it a leading small group, where you come together from different ministries to try to solve a specific problem and make recommendations that go to senior leaders. And it has, an advisor who has had experience working in government, and you end up delegating subtopics for small sub-reports and then bringing it together and discussing. And working at the Treasury Department, I found this particularly useful because we had a lot of interdepartmental activities. In my case, I was International Affairs, so it was the State Department, the Energy Department, and a number of other Commerce Department that we had different perspective, different goals, but we were trying to solve a problem and send a recommendation up to the National Security Council or to a group of our departmental secretaries. And so what I would recommend for the school, and it's a little bit along the lines of what Antonio Silva was mentioning, is a problem-solving activity where and it works also if you have a theme for each class that comes, where you have a problem and the audience for that activity is something that's understandable by a policymaker, because the graduates may end up working in staff for the Congress, or they may working in staff for politicians. I don't think all of them can follow your model, Emily, and end up being finance ministers. But I think if we have the ability to work together, to delegate, to come in again, to learn each other's language, and come up with proposals that would, for example, if you want something in the Congress to create a new institution, it's something that you decide you need to solve certain problems. How do you function productively as a member of the team that has to come up with that? You need some experience, and so in addition, when they graduate, their name will be on a report that showed that they had experience working in a multidisciplinary faction to focus on a particular mission to get something accomplished by your superior, political leaders or whomever it might be. And so I think it might be part of the curriculum to design, a kind of problem-solving activity that would be like a commission that was put together, or a small leading group, and just make it part of the program.
Let me finish with some bullets, okay? Just to wrap up, but in very specific, I pick up some points that I would like to reinforce here. First, the idea that we have to take into account the cultural shock, and then we need to surf. This is, I think, there is we agree with this. 5% to very new themes. We also agree with this proposal. Have the opportunity to field work. I think this is also a very good idea. Provide data access. This is also necessary especially for the postdoc school. Make connections with public and private enterprises. This is also necessary, although I'll explain. We have already this connection. Full-time staff. We really need a full-time staff. Have to build this. Brain attraction is also important, but it's not difficult. I think we have to think about this, but it's also a good suggestion. There are some others. I would add that we focus on themes and issues, and the idea that each year with one focus. Although this is interesting, but I think that we have mixed 2 or 3 different issues in 1 year, because then it will be very specific, and then this will not work in the spirit of a Spiderweb. So we could have 2 or 3 different issues every year. We can also rotate the issues. And I will add that we need a theoretical approach, make room for the dialogue between us. So this is also a very important thing. And the other thing is that we do have an open school. On Monday, we'll start the Spiderweb school. We have 3 different courses, 3 different professors, giving classes for 50 students, more than 50 students. Some are our graduate students. Others, they are coming from BNDES, FINEP, etc. They are public servants. And it's open. It's an open door because it's funded with public money. So it's open door, as our graduate program is also open doors. So we have room for everybody who is interested in knowledge in general. So this is a characteristic we do have in our public policy program. And the funding, actually we have two kinds of funding. We are a National Institute for Science and Technology, and we receive the funding from the Research Council. So we still have for the next 2 years this kind of funding. And also CAPES has this funding for the School for Advanced Study. And it's an ongoing, and you can have 10 projects in the same year. So we are not going to have 10, but we're going to have 2 or maybe 3. So it's plenty of room. The only question that is really is still open is about the students. Who are going to be our students? We just don't know yet, because you have to have a call for postdoc students, for postdoc research agenda, and we just don't know yet. This is going to be for the next August initiative. So we have to deal with this. We just don't know yet who is going to be our students. But the classes will continue to be open. And we have a very good number of students that want to come. And also we have to connect to some other experience and schools to make this, I mean, for all of them, for all the programs that are attached to our institute, National Science and Technology Institute. So we have already 9 graduate schools together. So we have to make this room for sharing the resources we can get in this program, in the Spiderweb initiative, but also to connect us to other graduate programs in Brazil and abroad. So this is kind of challenge we have. And thank you so much for this excellent suggestions and ideas, and this can continue in the website. We can open a room in the website to more suggestions and to build this initiative as an ongoing project that have to face all this challenge that you referred to. And I think it was a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much. So tomorrow, we continue in the morning with Professor Jorge Guimarães, who is the head of CAPES, and a roundtable of building a school for advanced studies which can deliver policy impact. And then in the afternoon, we'll have our final session on China.